And at 6, if folks are here, we'd like to take them on a tour of the pelt boiler and also make sure they have the program overview and could ask any questions on that. Mary, you put over for Academy or everybody is over there? Everybody's
and
over there.
Jennifer's over as well.
Okay. And then we're looking over the agenda and the warrants and the minutes, folks, if I can have a motion.
So moved.
And a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I sent Kim some more specific changes for a couple of the items. I'll just check. One, the administrative reports, when we talked about assessments and being able to look at student performance data to compare the schools. And we asked for math and literacy data, and that wasn't exactly reflected, so I asked for language on that. They can read it to you if you want.
Yeah, please.
So it would go in after advisory requests for information may be approved at board level. We cannot request as an individual. Mr. Scholes asked to see data that supported statements about variation in student performance among elementary schools across the SU, and data that would show inequity, as is currently there, that would show inequities at the high school level based on which elementary schools the student attended. And then, come back here.
So you have the minutes right there. You can.
So there was that one, and then the new business about changing our website. We also
Hold on that part then.
I changed
You
that.
got it in?
I changed it when
When
Dave
he gave
emailed it to me.
Okay, good.
So,
And on the website, I asked to also include that we had asked to have our budget drafts posted as
Updated,
well.
so
We have those drafts as well.
And so the only question I have on that, Mark and Kim and Dave, do you guys all remember that we asked for inequities of, I thought by school we asked, but we couldn't get that it wasn't tracked by school.
No, we won't get the high school part,
Okay.
but I did ask for it.
So do we have it reflected that what the administrators agreed that they could give us too? Did you put that in there?
I think it's Ms. Holliday advised at Ames what would be the best way to assess this.
Okay.
Administration
You
work and
already
get
had
that
that.
information.
Welcome, Todd. Okay, so that is the amendment to the motion. So
I'll second the amendment.
you need to move to amend your motion.
yeah, you'd have to move. It's a friendly motion.
Friendly motion.
Friendly
Okay,
amendment.
I move to amend my motion to accept the minutes from March the 2nd and the warrants and such to reflect Mr. Scholes' addition.
Second.
Second by Kim. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now at that point, we can go on to administrative reports. Andy, I'm looking at you because you're on the end.
Okay, well, I just want to say I'm happy to be here tonight.
Happy to have you.
And that's my report. We weren't actually, in the interest of time, we weren't going to give reports like Mark, I think, has a hiring.
Okay.
We weren't going to give reports tonight.
I want the minutes to reflect that's the shortest administrative report ever given
So
by Andy.
if I have extra minutes next week.
So I have a name to present for our art vacancy. We would offer the position to Rachel Mangine. She currently works at Guilford Central School 2 days a week. So we are offering her a 3-day-a-week position to work out nicely between Guilford and Green Street. I have been in contact with John Gagnon over at Guilford, and we can make it work. Just got to figure out a few details, but she did a tremendous job in the interview, had a great portfolio, and really excited to bring her on board at Green Street School. I think she's going to be a very natural fit and a nice addition to the school.
Okay. So, and what position, how long? Point
0.6.
and that keeps her at 0.4 with Guilford, so she's up to full.
Yep.
How was it that you phrased it, Mark? the spirit of cooperation, was that what we said?
Well, yeah, this is in the spirit of cooperation.
There we are. So in the spirit of cooperation, shall we have a motion
Do
to
we have to, because we said when we accepted
the
the
resignation?
resignation, we gave authorization to fill the position.
But we have to actually approve the hire.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So,
in the spirit of cooperation, I move that we approve the hire.
Second.
okay, any discussion? Just
I have
maybe,
a question.
yeah, Ted.
How does that work with benefits sharing?
So between Guilford and Brattleboro town, you know, it'd be prorated.
0.6 and 0.4.
0.6 and
It's the same way the salary works.
Yeah, yep.
But is there a difference of benefits that are offered or no?
No, it's consistent.
So it's a split of the same package?
Because when we negotiate for any of the paras and for any of the teachers, it's all the same.
I've just never offered any discussion when you say that, so I want to participate.
This is good.
Jump in wherever you're comfortable.
Andy didn't have his time.
Yeah, I'm just trying to fill some.
Just gonna comment that I happened to walk through Guilford School and see their artwork there the other day. It's nice, very nice. All in favor of this motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mark. Was there anything else from you?
No,
You want the
we
resume
do
back?
have the school handouts.
No, I don't think so. Do you want these back for any reason?
Oh, yeah, you should.
Okay, send them back. What were you saying, Mark? I think I cut you off.
Andy, Jeri, and I put together a packet highlighting programs at the 3 schools that will be a handout tonight at the meeting.
Maybe, Mary, we should all have one.
If you guys wanted to have one of those for reference, that'd probably be good.
Mary's passing those on.
Mary's gonna pass them out to us?
Yep.
Okay, so Jerry,
And I don't have.
you're happy to be here as well?
I'm delighted.
Deb, I think there might be some things from you because we had a discussion last time. Maybe there's an update? if not
Yes,
here?
there is an update. So just to bring you back to our last conversation, we were talking about the application for Head Start renewal and the fact that we are partially funded from now until June and the proposed changes are not yet approved by the federal government. We had a conversation last week about our proposed option A that I highlighted that you approved, and also the option B that I shared with you in our last meeting. And the feedback that I received on Monday from our federal specialist was that they were not ready to agree to either one of the proposals. And yesterday, I actually was at a meeting, a regional meeting with the regional program director, so the head of our ACF regional office. And I had her ear at the end of the meeting for about an hour, and I explained in detail where we were at and my frustration with the fact that we are needing to have some answers so that we can move forward, and the community is concerned and the families are concerned. And so her words to me were, we will ask you for additional information and then move your proposal to Washington. I received an email later that day from our program specialist who is not quite committing to that letter, but saying that they'd like to have more conversations, more documentation, and perhaps we come to a negotiated option C. So
And what would C look like? We don't have any
that's,
idea.
well, and that was how I posed my concern to the regional director. What would you suggest at this point? And so I'm not sure yet what that is. We'll be having a conversation about that next week. I understand that all of the proposals that are to this magnitude in the country are being filtered to Washington, and they are being reviewed individually by the deputy commissioner, which is actually great news because that means she's really taking in all of the documentation and all the narrative information and the justification for why we're proposing changes, which is a reflection of the shifts that are happening in our community. and our responses to that. But she let me know that one program had made a request for a change in their scope in October, and they still do not have an answer. So I think she was wanting to prepare me for the idea that this may be later rather than sooner. She does know that we are looking at a fall implementation date. And that's where we sit.
Any questions for Deb on that?
So, thank you.
What's the process? If you come up with Plan C that they're suggesting, then it still comes back to Policy Council and your staff and us for ultimate approval.
Yes, yes,
So it would be more discussion by everybody anyway.
yes.
While we have Deb, I'm just thinking we didn't specifically have it on here, but I'd like to take a minute and just discuss our preschool community forum. Is that okay? Because that would be our next meeting, April 6th, is it not? So I had suggested some ideas of what we might want to have at that preschool meeting, and I'll maybe read them out loud and see if the board members have anything to add to that, and if the administrators have anything to add that you guys are thinking of. But I was thinking we might start out with statistic about what Brattleboro and our surrounding towns look like, the numbers of preschool kids out, in all for the town, poverty situations as much as we know of for statistics, drug and alcohol abuse situations, and the average salary for parents at preschool age. I'm not sure if that's available in a breakout form, but what the average parental salary at early Head Start and Head Start is currently, and what the average salary is maybe for the county. So we have some idea of what we're looking at. We were talking about how parents can't afford other preschool options, and the Head Start and early Head Start has been that option, so I thought we might look at that data. And then statistics about pay for staff. What do the teachers at early Head Start and Head Start receive, and what do the teachers in our supervisory union receive? And the benefit packages I know are different, so if we had some idea of what that looked like. And then also what is available in our town. And I guess I should preface all this that I think I did a lot of this brainstorming based on the comment that somebody had, or you had, Deb, that was, we're not the only preschool in town, but Janice and the folks that we're talking were very concerned about leaving a certain population without any option. And so I thought we'd look at how many preschools are out there and what the average cost is, but then again, how many hours a normal preschool is running in comparison to, say, what's going on there. And the same thing about how many weeks per year, what sort of a calendar the other preschools are running on in comparison. And then I think it's good for us to have an understanding of what Head Start and Early Head Start do that's different from other preschools, an overview of the intake process. There's a chart that I remember looking at as Policy Council we have to update, and the mandates that we have, and an overview of the services that are provided in these programs in comparison to normal preschool. And then onto an understanding of what the schools do now, how EES works with Early Head Start and Head Start, and how the supervisory union works with Head Start, where the classrooms physically are, and we probably would need to give some brief overview of why we're in Westminster. To anybody who's coming to the forum would probably ask a question. And how the agreements work that we have, that we vote in every year, and the relationship between the school district, the federal government. And then at that point, I think we'd have enough information to have the open discussion on what would make things more equal for the teachers, what would make things more balanced for the kids, what's ideal, and what types of steps we need to take. Any thoughts on any of that? Is that too ambitious for a forum?
How would you facilitate that?
Well, the first section is just data that I think Deb probably has a lot of that, Deb and Janice already. And then I think we start into questions of, what would make things more equal for teachers and balance for kids, what's ideal. Those those questions, there's some community folks that would like to speak up, but I think also you guys.
So if I understand, and I may not have this accurately, but if I understand what the discussion has been, it has been to reduce the number of students per class and reduce the number of classes, and that would help to raise salaries so those teachers were on the equivalent of our teachers. Is that?
Well, I think that overall, my thought was that we've discussed briefly many times as a board, but never in any depth of what the plan would be. We've talked about possibly putting preschools into the elementary schools. We've talked about possibly having some sort of a combined structure. We've talked about trying to get teachers from early Head Start and Head Start on the same pay scale as what the supervisory union is, but we've never really flushed out any of that and really gone into it. So it comes about, the last meeting that you weren't able to be here ended that the concern from this option A and B would have eliminated spots, but even, and the question had come up too, whether it's worthwhile doing a community forum still on preschool, because those options are off the table, and that's where people were saying, we'd like to see the discussion. But I still would like to see this discussion just because we talk about it, but we never really go into it.
So what would be, what would happen if the number of slots is reduced? Do those kids, is it there are fewer kids who are eligible in the community, or if that's not, if there aren't fewer kids, then where do those kids go? What would happen? Do they go into? Do they not go to preschool? What?
Those are the concerns that were raised, which is probably why those options are seen as maybe not viable.
Right, that's the concern of why A and B is not being met with enthusiasm at the regional level. Yes?
It's actually, it's a multitude of reasons. Because it's a multifaceted approach to address, it's an approach to address several areas. One being the fact that we have concentrated numbers of children who are dealing with challenging behaviors and who are on IEPs. And we are operating quasi-therapeutical settings, and we're not equipped to do that. And so that needs to be dispersed somehow in the community. So, and the hope is that we can have more balanced compositions in our classrooms. And we are reducing the staffing pattern from 3 teachers to 2, with a ratio of from 3 to 16 to 2 to 12. We're upgrading the qualifications and the salaries with hopes that we can better address those 12 children who are in the classrooms. We are also proposing that we eliminate transportation in Westminster to help support the increase in the teacher salaries, and change, as you were referring to, our selection criteria so that we are encouraging a more balanced mix in our composition. And so in option B, really I think option A is off the table, and that's the one that was approved and was submitted. In option B, we proposed to, instead of dropping the enrollment in our classrooms to 11, we proposed to drop them to 12. We also proposed not to close one of the two Head Start classrooms that we were going to close. And so the regional's perspective on this now is that they need more supporting evidence or documentation about the issues, the challenging behaviors, and what that looks like in our community. And also they want assurance that these changes will in fact elevate our budget so that we can increase salaries. They know that even with these changes, that doesn't give us enough to match what the public school pays commensurate teachers. And so they're concerned about that, and they want to know what the next steps would be. So there's a lot more conversation that needs to happen. And the discussion at the last board meeting was, in fact, concerns from the community about your very same concern. But I think one of the outcomes of the conversation or the discussion was that we need to think about how we can maximize capacity in the community so that we are not highly concentrated with the most challenging children.
And by community, you mean the other, like private?
It can be private, it could be, you know, I'm forever saying I think it would be great if we could have classrooms in the schools and have, you know, a collaborative model where we have Head Start and non-Head Start children.
So at some point, I know, and I'm trying to learn more about how you do that, and I'm told it's a time-consuming, maybe a year-long process, and it's quite a bit of approval and red tape, and then you have to gather information. Will this have an adverse impact on the already established schools in the area and so forth? So there's quite a bit to it.
There is, but there's a big push from the federal level and the state to increase capacity. So the argument really is not relevant at this point in time. In previous years, yes, but they're encouraging that.
I think we, as the principals, really we don't know what that process is. So I think for us, we've talked about it a little bit. We sort of scratched the surface on bringing preschool classrooms into our buildings. You know, space is obviously an issue,
Right.
but I don't think collectively we don't have much knowledge about how you proceed or how you go about doing that.
So on Friday, I'm making a presentation at the leadership meeting, and hopefully that can be fodder for that conversation.
Are you thinking, Andy, that a community forum on preschool would be premature because you'd rather have that type of a conversation well understood before? The concern, I think, for the date setting last time was that if we didn't do it in April, it gets pushed down and then May becomes difficult, and then you're in the summer, and if you needed to start anything by, if you wanted it to start in September of 2017, you pretty much needed to be moving towards that very soon. So that's why we went for the April date.
The concern I have is that I think with this new information, it wouldn't hurt to put it off a month. And I just don't see when we have an Act 46 forum. Originally, in our plans, we had April 6th as an Act 46 forum. And that got pushed off because of this. And I guess I would just advocate maybe a second meeting in April to do that, or the first meeting in May.
I agree with Ron, and that's why I posed that question to you yesterday, well, maybe we should wait. I think it would be better once we actually have an answer from Head Start.
But we might not have that for him.
We may not have that until summer.
But the other part of this is, Jim Kane and I, Jim last year, started to look at salaries, and we did a comparative study. And Frank and I and Deb and Brenda are going to be getting together to kind of revamp that and look at that again. And I really think there's ways to increase the staff salaries. I'd like to have some time to work on that.
So is May enough time, or are you saying?
Yeah, I definitely think May would be.
I think pushing it back at least a month would be advisable. We may have more information. I could at least perhaps say, okay, we've reached this decision and it's left Boston and it's now in DC. And I think once it gets the Boston approval, the likelihood of getting it passed through DC is high.
Can I ask, do we or the board need to approve anything?
Any changes, yes.
Okay, so by putting it off in May, does that
I think that helps.
helps?
Yeah, because I'm imagining that, I'm really telling them this is urgent, that we will, we're scheduled to have another conversation next week, and I'm imagining that that by May, we will have come to some option C. And I'm actually going to solicit from them, okay, give us some ideas here. And so then it would be, I feel that we would be more confirmed about the direction we're moving in
So-
another couple of months.
The only school board meeting I have on my calendar, which could be wrong, is the 18th.
Right, right.
Does that match everybody else?
It does now.
But if you wanted to add one,
Well, I'm wondering whether a community forum would be on the 4th, May 4th, and then we'd leave our school board meeting on the 18th, or vice versa. We could do our normal school board
That would
meeting on the
make
4th,
sense.
and the 18th be the community forum.
well, I was thinking the 4th for the
4th
forum.
for the forum. Any ideas from you all?
What?
For the forum. The preschool forum would be May 4th as opposed to April
Is that a
6th.
Wednesday?
Yeah.
That's the first
The,
Wednesday.
I'm not sure if the legislature's done by then. If they're not, it would be nice to have it on a Monday so they could come and
Who could
attend.
come?
The legislators, the people who passed the bill, to be part of the public forum and see what we've done.
Well, no, I think the May one is the preschool forum.
Oh, is that? Oh, okay.
Yes.
I thought you were talking about
Yes.
the 46.
No, 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 no.
Let's try to figure out what we're talking about here.
Like-
So May 4th.
For a preschool forum.
May 4th preschool forum now instead of
Yeah,
April 6th?
sounds good.
So, do we need a motion on that if somebody
No,
would?
we just,
Well, give a motion. Let's do it.
Sure, so moved.
Second.
Okay.
Whereabouts?
Yeah, where do you want to have
Is that
it?
Oak Grove?
It was supposed to be EES in May, so
We don't have it at Canal Street, but it would have to be in one of the classrooms.
Is there enough room?
is that, and are the chairs adequate for adults? I mean, you really just, it's,
Yeah.
you don't want to do that to people.
Want to have it here?
We could make sure we have adult chairs there. And we have one classroom that's made into offices that I think there might be enough space that we can.
Oh, that's true upstairs.
Oh, it's a community forum?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a meeting.
No, I don't think we do have enough
Yeah,
space there.
I don't think so either.
So perhaps it should be here in this room. Andy, can we do that? Wednesday, May 4th at 5 p.m.? 5 p.m.?
5 p.m. That's a little informal.
Yes?
Fine, that's fine.
I just worry that 5 cuts into, I think in the past,
What do you
we've
want?
done forums, probably 6 is.
6
No
p.m.?
reason.
7?
Yeah, we can meet at 5 and look at 6 or just have it at 6. Too late. I don't know if we need to meet.
I don't know if we need to meet either. We're supposed to meet on the 18th.
6 o'clock.
So let's say 6, and if we need to
Todd
meet, we'll
says
put it
6.
in.
That's done.
Here?
Yes.
We're playing things together.
So then, going back to April 6th, so we're going to do an Act 46 forum, April 6th?
So yeah, we had a motion, but we didn't actually vote on it. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so then coming back to April 6th, making that into a school board meeting at 5 and then a community forum at 6? Is that what we're saying?
Okay.
And the community forum would be on Act 46.
Take that early childhood ed. Put in 46.
Can I have a motion on that?
Yeah, that's what it was.
I had 1% fund applications.
We're still going to do that at 5.
Okay.
And it's going to be here. Okay.
Act 46. And again, that's at Academy, whenever we're going to do a community forum, this is a better space, is that what we're
And
saying?
the community forum is at 6.
Motion on that, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
I don't suppose, so say 6 to 7:30, how's that? Let's see how that goes.
With Act 46. And we still have the 13th, Act 46?
We do, I won't be here for that.
Pardon?
I won't be here for that. Actually, Todd, that brings up another question on Act 46. Dave is our normal alternate, but he can't be here on April 13th. Is that the day? And I am gone. So would you mind being the alternate to come sit that night?
Is it a Wednesday?
It's at Oak Grove. Well, it may be at Guilford.
I currently have something scheduled for 6 to 8 p.m.
That would be the same time. Well, then I guess we're down one person.
Supposed to be at
It's supposed to be at Oak Grove, however, I asked Alice if we could swap. I asked Alice if we could swap to the week before, We're supposed to have Act 46 April 5th at 6 p.m. in Guilford. And I'm asking that to be switched to Oak Grove because Beth can't be there on the 6th in Guilford, and I can't be there on the 13th at Oak Grove. We're asking to switch those two.
You know, that has an impact on the board meeting too.
Well, nobody's giving me an answer on that. So,
That's why.
Jeri, I guess you can stand by for Act 46 coming to Oak Grove on either the 5th or the 13th. 6 to 8:30 is the
6 to
time. 8 on either of those.
I just better repeat myself.
So how far have I jumped ahead in this? Okay.
Joe, I wanted to hand out the capital plan at some
Yes.
point.
Well, so let's do that as administrative reports. We're still under. Deb, did that take care of all of your administrative reports? Okay. So then I'm going to hand it over to Frank.
Okay, I wanted to give you an updated capital plan document. It comes up this evening. We wanted to be sure everyone had a chance to take a look. So I handed out this same format on December 16 at our board meeting. And we're learning new information. Just today, I received some more insight that I did not integrate into this document around roof surveys and useful life and warranty expirations. So I will review that and provide you with another update as soon as we feel that we have something complete. So the difference in this document from the one you saw in December is really in the future years. It's primarily out in 2020, 2021. So, nothing significantly different in the shorter term. A couple of things that we have in process that will provide a much better estimate of capital costs down the road. As you recall, we had the Wyndham Wood Heat folks. The board approved moving forward with a Green Street school and a Green Street and an Oak Grove school investment grade energy audit. So that will be underway. They're scheduling that now. And we do expect that to help us define the biggest project I think that we see in the near term, and that is the Green Street heating system upgrade. So as we learn about that, we'll adjust this. So just maybe a quick reminder, the document is formatted by school. So you see Green Street on page 1, Oak Grove on page 2, Academy on page 3, and then our Canal Street, Estieville, and Powers House on page 4. I'm working with folks in our office, and Jim was able to contribute some on the reference information in the initial install date of these capital projects. That's going to keep us moving forward with essentially whatever the manufacturing useful life is of these assets. That's added to, you see the install date, and then if you go all the way to the second column to the end, it says a long-term replacement. So, for example, there in Green Street, we have a boiler 1979, and we had a 40-year useful life. Well, 40 years plus 1979 is equal to 2019. That's the format of this document throughout. And as we populate projects, we'll of course archive this information so that we'll have a very thorough capital plan and ability to anticipate expenses well into the future. But this is definitely a draft and preliminary. That's why we really haven't distributed widely, because the engineering analysis needs to be done in order to really have a high degree of confidence in the in not only the dollar amount, but the timing of the useful life. Just one other comment is at the end of the document on page 4, I did provide a cumulative total in the far right hand, the very bottom. Where we have total capital plan acquisitions, you see that that's adding all of the buildings as we have them in this draft document. 426,000 in fiscal year 16. Most of that is done. That's the primarily the academy boilers. But you see the numbers going forward. The 2018 is the one that has the Green Street project estimate of 800,000. That's a very, very rough number. We also had a somewhat tentative number for the discussion we talked about in Academy for either a replacement of that modular building or some sort of a renovation that would potentially accommodate a preschool program. So that's the bulk of the 1.4 million in that year when we go to page 4. Out further, the major costs there, and I know that there will be additional costs that are identified in the next couple of weeks after we go through the engineering studies, will be roofing costs. I did add, since the December 16 version, costs at the academy level for roofs that were installed in the early 90s. So in total, we have 2.5 million as a very rough estimate. You see at the very bottom on the far right, 5-year cumulative totals, and that's just simply the addition of those. In the context of our information meeting tonight, we've talked about the reserve that we added to the budget. And I think this is a good context to compare that number to. Certainly have pretty typical commitments. You remember, many of you remember 1996-97 was a bond that brought in a number of major capital improvements, and the useful life of those assets are toward the tail end, and it's time for us to look at a lot of replacements of those investments.
Is that the bond that we're not paying on anymore?
That's the bond that just matured, yep, in 2017. Yep.
Time to take it out again.
Yep. Any questions, suggestions?
Just one. I wasn't clear in the email exchange about the boiler that was there with the wood people. Is the energy audit that's taking place, is that going to include conversation or estimates about changing from steam to hot water at Green, or is that a separate study later?
Yeah, that's going to identify whether it's feasible to consider, but it won't be a specification document that we could bid. Yeah,
that'll come after. If it is feasible, then
right.
That has to happen.
That's right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't specifically mention, but on the Academy program, the Wyndham Wood Heat has really contributed very nicely to that. Not only the funding of the control upgrade that we're underway right now, but they've done a great job on coordinating the project management of it, and they've been a terrific resource for us. So
it's great having local people doing that.
It really is good.
They're also anxious to get the next one rolling soon. I think they probably want it faster than we were planning.
And it's actually what's developed, as part of the December, January state data that came out, with the equalized students that substantially lowered our cost per student, that has allowed that to be much more, much more accelerated project, because the funding is available. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Oh, could you put this up on our website too?
Good night.
Yeah, that would be good.
Sure.
I just, the concern from the finance committee, just if we got it, let's put it up.
Sure. And which website is it?
WSESU.
Well, we voted the other day to get rid of our website that's standing.
Yeah, so the one that's on the,
So your budget is on the WSESU law.
yeah, and our minutes are there, and the link to the video, so everything but this.
Okay, Ron, do you have any administrative report?
I do not.
I don't know what to do with these guys today. We don't have any administrative.
We have the
You know,
Shocking.
we were supposed to start this meeting at 5:30, by the way. And
Well, aren't you glad we were all prom?
I know. It's just in our work
Why I
plan.
was late.
It's just in our work plan. And Todd was looking at his work plan thinking, I'm going to be here early.
Yeah, as usual.
Yeah, so just, I've already made a note for next year, start this meeting at 5:30.
Okay.
So I'm just telling you, that's what
Just
we're.
if I can remember that one.
No, I'll have it. It's good.
Well, this was.
Yeah,
good.
the
I think
agenda
we-
says 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Right here.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
I didn't catch this.
Well, I think this is all right though, because we had some extra things to talk about with preschool.
We pelletize the Putney Forest for all of them.
You do have something now?
They've got a couple of them.
It's almost like I'd like a recess.
Well, I'll go over that with you in a minute. Okay, so the only other thing on here is our Act 46 update. Todd, I know Dave was not at the meeting. Mark, Kim, and I were. Dave has watched it already on the video, yeah?
half of it.
Half of it. So, sheesh, how to update since the last time we met. I guess we're making some on the, I can't remember where we were last time we met. We had one meeting where we kind of had a straw vote, not a straw poll, and it seemed like most people in the room were looking, thinking that accelerated merger probably wouldn't work for various reasons, but we didn't take an actual vote. And some of those reasons included Vernon's
School choice.
We talked
school
about all that
choice.
last time.
We did? All right. So that's where we'd left it, and then we had one meeting since then where we went back and went back to the accelerated merger documentation to see where we were on that. And Alice and Amy and I had met and hammered out between the three of us some ideas on some wording that we had been stuck on around school closures and governing board and the vote in the town and local control, town meeting, that sort of thing. And we put those into the study committee's draft of articles of agreement, and
The at-large membership?
discussed that with all the membership, and everyone kind of went with that. The main difference there was that the board would change, so Brattleboro would no longer have a definite foregone majority.
Isn't it?
Well, the legal advice that was given from the state was that you could do that as long as it went to an at-large representation, and so it would be voted on upon by everybody, would be the at-large. So it could well be a Brattleboro person, but it could also be somebody else. Yeah. Kim was just handing
Yeah,
to.
please.
So it's, the board representation that we came down to would be 2 from Brattleboro, which were, before we were 3, and 1 from each of the outlying towns, and then 2 at large.
So when I went to the meeting where we talked about what that would look like, the numbers from each town on the board, I was under the impression that was like a mandated, that
Yeah, so
formula
were-
was mandated by law, not.
So were we
open to
until
interpretation.
Alice and Ron and Amy and Christine, I believe, were all on that conversation, telephone conversation where they were discussing various issues with the legal
Yeah,
person, and he said, no, it has to be, an at-large would also still meet that mandate of population representation,
okay.
because you would send it out for voting by everybody. And so it's possible, that only Dummerston people would run, or only Brattleboro people would run on that at-large position.
Yeah.
But theoretically, there would be several people to choose between.
And then all the towns vote, like if Dummerston had two different people that wanted to be on and they only get one, all the towns would vote for which of those gets on?
We had a lot of conversation about that to try to wrap our heads around it. So the town, the Dummerston would vote for their Dummerston rep, and each town, right, would vote for their rep.
Right.
But the at-large, everybody would vote on.
Everybody.
So what was the formula then? Brattleboro to,
2 at-large, 2 Brattleboro, and 1 for everybody else. And then there was discussion, and I'm not sure if we had complete agreement about 8 or 9, whether we should have 3 at-large or 2 at-large, and we left it at 8 in the end.
I thought that was still open for negotiation.
I think it was
Spirit of
left.
cooperation.
Right, I think it was left for the moment that we'd probably return to it, but right now it still says 8. People are kind of mulling that one.
does it 9 make sense in terms of?
Well, that was the discussion. We did look up in Robert's Rules of Order, if there's a tie, it went to...
Fails.
It fails.
Yes.
A tie means it fails. Because we didn't know what that meant, but someone had brought a book and we
It
looked it
means
up.
9. That's what that is.
Well, we can take that back. Basically, that's the other point of this, is that as we go through this, then the people are taking it back to their boards to discuss and see if there are comments like that. And if it means 9, then to you, then we can bring that back and say our board felt like 9 made more sense. But it would not be 9 with 3 for Brattleboro, it would be 9 with 3 at large.
3 at large.
Yeah. I mean, that part wouldn't change.
And that question about who votes for who,
Oh, I think we were getting clarification.
yeah, the 2 school directors are designated to be held by eligible residents of Brattleboro, and that same language would be for the other towns. So it's the at-large reps that are voted across the whole union.
But so I'm not sure if would Brattleboro people vote for the Dummerston people?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's the
No, unless
Dummerston
they're
residents
Some of
vote
them
for
are set up.
Dummerston.
Some of them are
Yeah.
set up that way.
Well, Brattleboro would vote for at large.
Brattleboro would vote for your designated,
So would everybody else. Yeah.
and then the at-large, and so would everybody else.
So did this formula change some of the language around these other issues that were holding it up? Like
Yes.
school closure? and-
Because the school closure, the problem that I had, and some other folks as well, the veto power that I call it, so that the town where a school would be closing, that community would be able to say, no, we want our school no matter what, and everybody else would
It
have to
drives
go
our
along.
everyone's tax rate up.
So, in this case now, we changed the school closure language as well, so it says specifically that towns would have veto power for the first 5 years, I think is what's in here right now.
Well, there'd be no closures for 5 years.
And schools would have veto power during that time. Although schools could also, no schools are planned to be closed, and there would be veto power
Meaning they could.
for 5 years. Right, the schools could say no, absolutely, for 5 years, so veto power we put in there specifically. And then also a school could ask to be closed if they wished, and there's a procedure laid out for that. And then the school closure language that I had done before, we actually put in and went through that and talked about how that would, where is this? How that would work, not here, not in this part. But it would be a supermajority, that was one of the big changes, and the supermajority was 75% of the unified board, and the 75% is no longer just Brattleboro by demand, by the way that it's set up.
Because the board's different.
The board would be at large. It could be still just Brattleboro, and probably logically it might even be because of population, if more population decides to run from each, if it's a proportional percentage, but wouldn't be a given. So that gave a reassurance factor. And then also, I think the language that we were very specific in about the process that we would go through to do any school closures. Mm-hmm. And it would be a year-long process with 4 or 5, I forget the number, community forums and discussions and warnings before any closure. And the closure would take into account a various list of things that I put together, such as what would we do with the school and what's the effect on the community. One of the other things that we put in there that wasn't in before is now that if the school closes, it would be sold back to the town for $1 or something. So that community would still have their building.
And the other issue is school choice.
School choice, we didn't really talk about the last meeting.
Well, except the warning article accommodates that. So the question was whether all school districts had to be in agreement for the merger. And we were given alternative language that if, let's say, Vernon decided that they know that they don't want to go forward with this, they could still bring it to the voters, and let them determine. But there'd be language like a revision to the forming school districts. In the event a majority of town school districts vote to approve the merger, but one or two districts vote no, a modified union school district will be formed pursuant to the articles. In this case, the MUD will, whatever name we decide. So you could go through a vote this spring with the idea that if Vernon wanted to opt out, they would have that ability. It changes the configuration to a modified union school district, much like Chittenden East, Mount Mansfield District, where Huntington decided to stay out, but all the other districts joined. We wouldn't get as much of the incentive. We'd start at 8 cents and go down 8.642 as opposed to 10 cents. But that's kind of the alternative if Vernon opted out.
But wasn't there their ability for their students to have school choice was one of their issues.
That's the big issue.
So they wouldn't, so is it now decided that if they were part of the union, that wouldn't be on the table for them?
We had legal
Right.
clarification around that.
Yeah, which says.
And once you form this new union, the existing law that they operate under is null, void, gone. So the only way to do school choice, perhaps for Vernon, would be for them to vote to stand alone, which I think there's a little more clarity coming on some of that, what exactly that means, including, how much would they pay to the rest of us for the support services, when that might kick in, and how, I don't know if it's completely clear that they can stand alone for forever or if they have to merge eventually.
I don't know. They would have to go through the self-assessment process with the Agency of Ed and the state board.
So those were some of the major issues. There was also a discussion, there was a change by Dummerston of who they had sent to the study committee. They, when they regrouped after their votes, they decided to change their representative and alternate to the study committee. And there was some discussion with the state legal authorities as to if that was allowed under the way the statute was written. And so we talked about the interpretation that was passed through to Ron and to Alice as the chair, and had a little bit of opinions by everyone shared, and then decided that we'd kick that back to Dummerston to make their own determinations of what they wanted to do next. But that took up a bit of time at the beginning of the meeting. So tomorrow night, Rebecca Holcomb comes, and she's the Secretary of Education for Vermont. She'll be in Putney at 6, am I right?
6 o'clock.
6. If anybody wants to come hear what she has to say.
So the warning, if somebody opts out and the accelerator isn't approved, or if a couple opt out, this it automatically becomes a MUD, so that there's not going to be an option to do the self-study and petition to stay the way we are.
Well, that was one of the discussions.
I mean, that's assuming that the study committee goes with that option, and that it would pass by 4 towns.
But the wording, whether the wording goes on the vote that way, it was discussed. It was the first time we'd heard that the legal folks said you could do that. So as we've done with a lot of these meetings, we kind of throw it out, we let everybody mull on it and think about it for a week, usually is all we get as we come back to it.
Just my 2 cents is don't if you have to present all the options so people know what the options are, rather than decide which ones you're going to let people think about or vote on.
So
If you're
that,
going to have any option, you have to have them all.
that brings us to, it's almost 6 when we were going to stop anyway, but that brings us to what we're going to talk about here with our folks that are coming in already for the informational night. And as I've already mentioned to you, that basically what I wrote, and we'll follow through some of that. We have some supporting documentation that Lyle and Frank and Paul probably put together. And Deb, I know, has put some stuff in. And then we also will segue in and take some questions on Act 46. And this is kind of our first real forum, although the plan on the timeline, and that's a slide I was just putting in so we can talk about it. The idea would be that the board is reviewing the accelerated merger documentation and preparing the final report, and then we would have a study committee vote. And I believe that's about April 25th or May 2nd. Somewhere in that time is what we're looking at the moment. And then it would be, if the study committee voted to pass that forward, then it would be submitted up to the Agency of Education. And the state Board of Education has a meeting scheduled on May 17th when they would review our merger, if we chose to do that, accelerated merger. And hopefully we'd get approval back within about a week. And at that time, we'd plan a special town vote and warn the vote, and then we would have town forums. And the goal of the study committee, I don't think I'm overstating to say it's the goal of everybody, that we'd like to have the forums be pretty uniform and all presenting the same information in all the different towns. So that would go on, let's see, this thing has to keep going up and down. If we were doing that, it would be sometime in May with the special town vote after.
And I would just add, in April 6th, when you have a forum, I think we would outline all of those options as well.
Oh, at that town forum, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still thinking preschool forum.
No.
But I tried to put that onto a slide so that people can see it tonight too, so there's some idea of what the timeline would look like if that's the option that we do go for. So any other questions on anything? Otherwise, I think, do we actually adjourn?
Yeah, I would recess. We left some time if anybody wanted to see the pellet boiler and any other facilities at Academy. I think the pellet boiler is the most important one. And then we're going to start the overview at 6:30.
So all of you guys that have come in, welcome, and we're going to recess, but Andy, I'm sure, would lead the tour around to the pellet boiler, which is very exciting. And then at 6:30, we'll start with the information night here.
I move that we recess.
Second.
All in favor? So welcome to the information night for the Brattleboro Town School Board. And we have kind of a shorter presentation than some years, so there's lots of times for questions as well. I'll turn it over to Robin.
Well, you want to introduce or
You want to go into different?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll introduce ourselves. Jill Stahl-Tyler, I think we have signs too, right? Yeah, so it's not too hard. The chair.
Kim Price, the clerk.
Mark Truhan, the vice chair.
David Scholes, remember?
Todd Roach, member.
So I'll introduce the administrative staff. I'm Ron Staley, Superintendent of Schools. We have Deb Gass, the Director of Early Ed Services. We have Andy Paciulli, Principal of Academy School. Mary Ross is Assistant Principal at Academy School. Mark Speno, Principal at Green Street School. Jeri Curry, Principal at Oak Grove. Mary Kaufman is doing an administrative internship at Green Street. We have Lyle Holliday, our curriculum director, one of our curriculum directors, and Paul Smith, I see out there. We have Brian Bittner, one of our coaches in the district, and Lisa Duncan-Hawley, our director of special ed, Janice Stockman, early ed coordinator. I'm sorry?
They didn't wave. They're keeping it in.
And Frank Rucker, our business administrator. So what we thought we would do tonight is provide a budget overview with some initial information about the tax impact We wanted to talk about issues of poverty that affect the school district and certainly has a bearing on our budget. We want to talk about student outcomes in terms of how our students are doing. We'll talk about operational efficiencies. If you were here a little earlier and got a chance to look at the new pellet boiler, that's one great example of that. We'll also talk about remediation and enrichment opportunities, and then we'll have a focus on early ed services as well. So Jill's going to start with a budget overview and things of such.
And there's some sheets of paper over on the blue table, and there's information on the programs and special offerings that are in the town schools. If I don't use a microphone, you can all hear me, yes? Yeah? So, no. I just have to see if I know how to work this thing. Okay, so I'll jump right to a lot of it I'm basing on what I've already written, so perhaps you've already read it, but this year's budget ended up being not a normal budget, and it's a shift in the way the state has calculated our equalized pupil numbers, and it gave us an extraordinary opportunity because they suddenly gave us some additional kids and that we've already had in our budget before. So we actually have an opportunity this year to set aside money in a reserve fund and still have a decrease in taxes. So I wanted to start right with that. And our current school property tax rate is 1.677. The projected is 1.594. Reduction of 8.3 cents or a decrease of 4.9%. Again, the decrease is largely attributed to level funded operating costs, a significant increase in equalized pupils, and it's the Act 166, which allows for additional preschool student counts. So this is a positive thing for us, and we took advantage of that when we went through it. As a board, we've struggled with this decision because we like to bring in essentially level funded budgets, which this one is. And that includes your normal salary increases and the health insurance, which went up by 7.9 this year. But at the same time, we know that our reserve funds that we've given in the past have allowed us to decrease the tax burden to the town. And so we had a rather lively debate, which you can all go watch on BCTV, kind of humorous in the end, on what we kind of tried to decide what makes sense. And this is where we've come up with this budget. Now, as we've noted before, we have a high impact of poverty. And it's not exactly going away. It also causes us higher student special education needs, and just the bottom line there, the higher poverty is linked to lower proficiency. And I struggle with that sometimes just as a human. Whenever I hear people saying, well, just because we have higher poverty, we automatically need to spend more on kids, but it's a proven fact, and the administrators keep telling me that that's just something, it's nationwide, it's there. We spend 21% of our budget on special education services to students, and the state average is 16%, although we are lowering our special education budgets as well. They are going down. If you look at free and reduced lunch and homeless data, Academy School this year is 62, Green Street 71, Oak Grove 55, State of Vermont is 43. So we're significantly higher. Homeless numbers is a number that I never dreamed we'd be tracking, and we track it, and it keeps going up. We're at 27 for right now for the Brattleboro Town School District. Another number that folks asked us to track was a couple of years ago, and we've been very much tracking that. And students leaving for private schools, there's 6 kids left, and just in this year alone from our 3 town schools, and 6 kids came back. So that was kind of a net 0. Andy, you gave me numbers this morning that I wrote down, and now they're in my pile. Do you remember them off the top of your head?
Oh, yeah. Well, in Academy, we've been keeping track of that data for 4 years now, and over a 4-year period. And it's just from Academy. We have lost 6 kids have started here and went to local private schools. However, 7 have gone out, 26 have come in. So it's a net plus of 19. So we're bringing the kids back from private schools to our schools. So again, over a 4-year period, 26 kids have come in, only 7 have gone out.
So I wanted to share that because I know that's a question people have had on what's going on with our schools. We had a big discussion on that, I think, last year. If we look at the comparative statistics and education spending per equalized pupil, the state average and our number puts us at 8% higher. Equalized education school tax rate, we're 8% higher. However, look at the poverty. We're at 61, state average is 43, so that puts us at 42% more poverty than the rest of the state. Thank Frank for all of the mathematical computations earlier this afternoon. And then the special education total percentage of cost, again, the state average is 16, we're at 21. And we spend 30% more than the rest of the state to educate our students. The cool thing, though, the exciting part, is that our proficiencies are not so bad off here. Literacy proficiency, we're 27% higher than the rest of the state. Math proficiency, we're actually 7% lower. However, they point out that with the level of poverty that we have, typically you would not see that. You would see a much higher increase. Much different relationship there. And the science proficiency, we're 2% higher than the state. Lyle put this together. It's a little bit easier to read here than it was on my computer.
Okay. So this is the ranking. All schools in the state are ranked, and these are the bottom 10 schools, and you'll see that some of them are equal or above us in levels of poverty, but they are performing far, far worse than we are in literacy and math proficiency. Our schools are, Oak Grove is around 27, Academy 62, and Green Street is, I have that number someplace, 141. So we're outperforming many, many schools that are equal to us in poverty levels.
One of the things that bothers me as a parent, though, is we spend all of our time concentrating on working on the poverty and worrying about free and reduced lunch kids, and then I wonder what happens with the other kids that are not in that position. I've seen schools from other schools around the state showing that in order to decrease the gap, increase the kids on the lower scale, that they're spending a lot of time and energy on those, and then they decrease it by bringing the top down. And this is not happening here. And so we're actually kind of a rising tide for everybody. So much so that there's a recent study that was commissioned by the state, Picus-Oden study, which actually Frank and I went in and sat in on that for a day. And they used Academy and Oak Grove cited as exemplary students or schools that demonstrated significant improvement in student outcomes sustained over time as measured by the Vermont State Board of Education Learning Standards. And they achieved these favorable student outcome results largely within the resources identified as adequate based on successful schools research. And the report emphasizes effective use of strategies such as building strong leadership, common curriculum, focus on student outcome data, culture of responsibility for outcomes, collaboration among staff, carefully planned student-staff schedules, effective curriculum, and general support from the SU. The way I said that was a little bit looser worded, I think, in my report to you all, but basically that we have a lot of things that we do that are in the budget that you all have approved and supported as a town for many years. And we're getting the results because of that budget. And it shows. And it's been noted by the people that came in. These Picus-Oden folks are from Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin-Madison, a retired professor. But he has been around to many different states and many different schools, different sizes, things like Chicago, states like Wyoming, the whole state, which is a little more like us. And they were impressed enough to pull our schools out. We've also done some other things throughout our budget here, where we've done the pellet boiler upgrade on schedule, on budget, and we expect lower operating costs. This wasn't exactly the winter to look at that. That's all right. Currently implementing heating, ventilating control system upgrade at Academy to maximize the benefits, improve the classroom learning environment. And the control project's expected to be funded by a grant, which is $75,000. Secured funding to assist with the replacement of the Estiville boiler and oil tank with the pellet system. Project to be was completed in December of 2015. And board has approved investment grade heating energy audit for Green Street and Oak Grove schools. We expect reports this spring and will further define capital needs. Some folks had asked us, the finance committee in particular had asked us about why we had done the reserve. And I think I'd rather have Frank do this slide and discuss and walk through it. If you have, he can, I think it's better.
Okay, sure.
Could you also just go back one slide and just talk about the Wyndham
Sure.
initiative, because it was such a benefit?
Yep, it goes backwards. So am I giving it all over to you at this point in the file?
Sure. So regarding the Wyndham Wood Heat, or the Clean Energy Development Fund, this is the resource that you may have read about, $1.6 million that was dedicated to Wyndham County, specifically schools and municipalities, to address energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. This is part of the Vermont Yankee closing and an agreement between the state and Vermont Yankee. So we were very assertive in applying for these funds. There was a criteria to qualify for these investments, and we've been very impressed with the folks that have come together. It's a group of local engineers and energy advocates, energy efficiency advocates, and they've helped develop the specifications for these projects, this control project. They helped oversee the Academy boiler, and they are also doing investment grade energy audits for Green Street and Oak Grove, which we expect will inform additional projects. So this is also sort of an extension of capital fund reserves and in long-term capital planning. The district does not have a dedicated capital reserve fund, as you know. As Jill's pointed out, there's been some unique funding formula developments as a result of legislation that has significantly increased our equalized student count, which consequently substantially reduces our cost per student. And the whole funding formula is based on cost per student. It's not when it comes to calculating a school tax rate, they don't look at the grand list at all, which is probably not news to most of you. But at the municipal level, the grand list has a lot to do with the tax rate. At the school level, the grand list has nothing to do with the calculation of the tax rate. So what has happened is our preschool count, as a result of this Act 166, has increased by, I think it was about 50 students. And yet our costs didn't increase proportionally. And so therefore, there's a document in your book, your town report. It shows this calculation. It's on page 142. But it basically it explains, as Jill had mentioned earlier in the slide, why we have this opportunity to essentially create a reserve at a discounted tax rate. It's not something we would expect to see happen in the future. So a couple of things is that, number one, we don't have a reserve, and yet we do have a long-term capital plan that is draft. We're actually putting it on the website tomorrow. We did a brief review of it earlier this evening with the board. It's about $2.5 million worth of projects. None of them are a particular surprise. Many of them are roofing projects that were funded in 1995, 96, and those useful lives warranties are starting to mature, and we need to revisit those sort of projects. We mentioned in this building, we just did the pellet boiler. It was about a $300,000 project. We know in Green Street, we have a 1970-something boiler and a 1929 boiler that is steam. And we know that we're on the tail end of that reliable, useful life, even though it has been adequate. Unlike Academy, where we didn't have to go through and rerun copper lines throughout the whole building because they already have the hydronic system, at Green Street, it's likely it would be a complete retrofit of the building. So we're estimating maybe as much as 3 times that cost, that $300,000. We will have an engineering study that will help us define that specifically. So when we look at the typical depreciation schedule over the assets that we have over the next 5 years, we see over a couple of $1 million in these sorts of improvements that are time to plan for. So that again is a reason for having this assumption in the budget. The other thing a reserve does, in the way the Brattleboro Town electorate created the reserve in 2011, was made it a general reserve as opposed to a specific restriction. And a general reserve also allows us to deal with the uncertainties that we're seeing this year, more than most, where the legislature has made significant changes to the funding law. The big change was these allowable growth caps on spending per student. And when they create constraints on a school district, basically retroactively, so that we didn't have the time to look at programs and staffing levels, they just simply imposed it right in the middle of the process, the current year process. A reserve allows a board to stabilize a tax rate by essentially applying fund balance to the appropriation. It's a source of revenue, and it's something that's common. And I know that you're accustomed to seeing that in prior budget proposals. So those are 2 important reasons. And just as a reminder, as Jill already pointed out, even though we did add a significant amount to the budget in reserves, even with that included, we're estimating the taxes to be down 8 cents or $1.59. They are estimates. We have to see what happens with the legislature in terms of the school funding indices that set tax rates, but there's no reason to indicate that we're going to be too far off from these estimates. I think the next slide also, I can go through this pretty quickly. It's just sort of the specifics. If you looked in your book, you would see the detail data on page 154. You would see the one significant line item increase in this budget, and it is this reserve we're talking about. It's in that top group of accounts, and if you just run your finger down through the difference column, you'll see a negative 221,000, and then you'll run right into a 570,000 increase. That the negative 221 is the final payment has been made this year for the bond that I mentioned was done 20 years ago. So that's a decrease in spending of 220,000. We added 646,000 in that next line down in the budget to address these issues that we just talked about. The net between those 2 numbers is about 400,000. So what we're looking at is how would we use these funds? This is also to respond to questions from the Finance Committee that we wanted to respond to. So we've mentioned the Academy project, that we've actually are just wrapping that project up in terms of the cash flow. That's in this fiscal year. If we have an approved budget that includes the $646,000, we would, instead of going out and financing that Academy project, we would just use those reserves. So 646 minus the net of the transaction would leave us 408,000 for these other projects that we've talked about. And again, I've put this in the context of the $2.5 million long-term projects. So we would have 400,000 as sort of the beginning. Not that we would expect to finance all of that in 1 year, but it helps us manage the number of projects that we have. The other point is on the third bullet down is we did have a surplus in fiscal year 15, 664,000, and that's about 4% of our operating budget. So for folks that are thinking about, well, how much is this relative to what we manage? For a 4% is a relatively low proportion of your operating budget. And then if we add the 664 and we just retain the 400,000 that we're talking about, you see that would bring us up to about $1 million in reserves, and again, $1 million divided by our fiscal year 16 budget of about 15 million is about 7%, and that we do feel that that's a prudent number to have for these various issues that we'll be addressing in the near term. So I think that's the review of that portion. Any questions I can try to address?
We can come back to numbers. At this point, then we pass it over to Lyle to go over some specifics.
So we feel like we do a pretty good job, but we always like to find out what parents are thinking. So each fall during parent conference time, when parents come into schools to meet with teachers, we give them a survey. And on a scale of 1 to 4, 4 being absolutely perfect and 1 meaning we need a lot of work, we've just picked out a few of the questions. So you can see my child receiving academic support needed is a 3.6. Teachers are responsive to parental concerns, 3.7. So schools are clean, 3.6. Just the bottom line there, the average response for all questions on the parent survey was 3.55, so pretty good. We do know that there are areas that we need to have some growth and areas that we need to have more discussion and looking at. This year, for the first time, we put on the survey a question about how students feel riding the bus. This was our overall lowest score. We feel like this gives us a baseline. We know this is an area where we need to spend some time and look at what's causing people to feel unsafe and how we might work with that. But that was our lowest score at 3.11. And then a couple of other areas that we're discussing how we might improve, facilities work, and that goes along with what Frank was just talking about with upgrading our facilities all the time. Communication, some people feel like I assume, feel like there's not enough communication. I don't imagine people think there's too much communication, but we don't pull out if it's too much or not enough. And the other one that Jill points out quite often to me, my child is assigned an appropriate amount of homework. That's another area where we need to be better at questioning, because we don't know, are they being assigned too much homework, which some people think, or not enough, which some people think. So that's
Well, I'd
another.
answer it actually differently for each child.
That's right.
Depending on the year.
So those are some areas that we still need to look at. So we think, so how can we get all this done? Because you saw earlier that we are, oh, yes.
So before you move on,
Sure.
Just a thought, and I've seen this, I've seen this parent survey that you've done.
if you used a 5-point scale instead of a 4-point scale, people could actually say it's average instead of having to pick a lower or a higher thing than they really feel. And I mean, it probably wouldn't change the overall score, but it would give you a better sense that, yes, these people are satisfied instead of, you know, instead of going down or up. So it just a thought.
Yes.
If I could chime in on that, had a little bit of experience on those kinds of polls. There are often, and I don't know if you guys did this, there are some good arguments for going both ways. And one of the argument for an even number of answers is that you actually get somebody, you can't be down the middle. You got to take a side, one side or the other. And sometimes that's more useful information than letting people say, yeah, everything's fine in the middle.
Yep. That's why we do this. For that reason.
You have to take a stand. So, a couple of things with this slide. We're going to talk about MTSS. We have been requested by you not to use too many letters. So whenever we're using letters, we're trying to also put the full meaning. Multi-tiered systems of support is what we at each school work to have in place so that all students are getting a baseline, and the all would be considered tier 1, and you're going to see tier 1 coming up. Some students need more intensive work. That would be considered tier 2. And a very few students need very, very intensive work. And this is in behavior and academics. So I'm going to take a couple minutes and talk about the academics portion, and then turn it over to Marisa Duncan-Hawley, who's going to talk about the behavior portion. So how do we address the needs of all students? Every classroom, doesn't matter which classroom you go into in any of our schools, we have students who learn the material very quickly and students who need some more time or some extra supports to learn the material. So when teachers are beginning by planning those lessons, they're trying to think about how they're going to address the needs of all those students. All students are included, as I said, in a tier 1, which is with the regular classroom teacher in the regular lesson. And then throughout the day we have, it's called different things in different schools, but many schools it's called a skills block. And that's a more intensive, tier 2. That was that yellow, the yellow part of the triangle. And that's offered for students who are struggling or students who need more, who need some enrichment, that they've learned it very quickly and they're ready to dive in deeper. So tier 2 is for both struggling and enrichment. And then a separate time still for students who are really struggling and need some very intensive assistance. So how do we decide which students need what? Every day, teachers are doing assessment. Not necessarily a formal paper pencil, but it could be a teacher observing student work, using exit cards, which is at the end of a lesson, 1 or 2 questions. The student would jot down an answer, maybe use an iPad to put in the answer. It goes directly to a teacher's computer. Unit tests, pre-test, post-test, check-ins as the lesson's being taught. We do what's called AIMSweb, which is a benchmarking system, a screener 3 times a year to let us know, oh yeah, these students seem to be on target, progressing as they should, or whoa, we gotta watch this student. We need some more information. So we use the AIMSweb for that, and of course, every teacher has their own teacher-made assessments. Behavior.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about, earlier Jill had said about a culture of responsibility. And so one of our responsibilities is really looking at the children who are struggling with their behavior in the schools. And there's been a commitment from leadership to really work on how do we help kids really be successful in school. And 2 ways that we've been doing it is through the Positive Behavior Intervention and Support, which is our PBIS supports. And what that is really having an entire school culture looking at how we interact with children in really positive ways and working as a community. For the children where that works, but maybe not enough, that those kids really need much more targeted work. 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, we started the Supportive Teams for Educational Progress, which is our STEP program.
And that's where we have a behavior specialist and paras who have been well-trained, and also a teacher involved with that to support children with their, who are struggling with their behavior, but also giving teachers skills and supports as to how do I deal with a child who is having a really rough time in my classroom without having everything unravel. So we've had great success with the STEP program. Those services we're providing in each one of the schools in Brattleboro town. We have been trying to hire a BCBA, which is a behavior, a board-certified behavior analyst, I'll remember that, for this year, but we've also been sharing one of those the behavior coach at Oak Grove. So our goal is to really make the culture really positive for every child, give teachers the tools that they need for children who are struggling. We understand that kids come to school sometimes and they're just not quite ready, and we need to help them. So that's the work that we've been doing as far as MTSS, and really looking at how do we help each child in school. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to make sure you folks have is a handout on the after-school and extended school programming that happens at the 3 schools. We just pass these around. Because it's come up in questions about, okay, so you're doing a lot for remediation, but what about enrichment? And so we do have the enrichment program that happens in 3 schools, the 3 schools all during the course of the day. So clearly, as Lyle mentioned, the student that really is excelling pretty quickly, we have people that will work with that student to get, higher enrichment opportunities. But then we have a really extensive after-school programming. So I just want to make sure that you take a look at this and see all of the programs that students can be involved in.
So we are very conscious that teachers need ongoing help with addressing all the needs that they are receiving in their classroom. And so we have a professional learning plan. We work on it with Brian and Paul from the central office, input from principals, Marisa, and myself, work together to create a long-range plan of how we're going to address the needs of teachers working in classrooms. So in the past few years, we've addressed these math, literacy, writing, behavior, differentiation, which means making sure that the lessons that the teachers are planning are taking into account all the different levels they may encounter in their classroom. And we've done work with science and social studies. We do this at grade level meetings. Today, today was a grade level meeting for 2nd grade. So all the 2nd grade teachers in the supervisory union came together. Shelley Wilson did some behavior work. Michaela Sims did some work with social justice and diversity. Paul Smith and Brian Bittner did some work on assessment and progress monitoring, and making sure that we're all sort of consistent in the way we're assessing students. And then the full afternoon was spent with Ben Lord, a science teacher from the high school, who came in and worked with all the 2nd grade teachers. One of the things we've realized over the years is a classroom teacher in the K-6 level has to be the master of literacy and math and science and social studies and writing and everything. And we have excellent content teachers at the middle school and high school, and so we've started to really tap that resource. The high school principal and middle school principal have been really helpful in allowing those teachers to come in and work with our teachers at grade level meetings. So we were fortunate to have someone working today with 2nd grade on science. Okay, and now we're going to do some preschool.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think we can all agree that learning starts even before kids get to Oak Grove Academy or Green Street School. And so that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit right now, is what we do for preschool education in Brattleboro. And so I'm going to talk about 2 things. One is early childhood special education, which is a program that I oversee for kids with delays and disabilities who are on IEPs. And There are right now 38 of them who are Brattleboro residents, but my team works with 53 kids throughout Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. We are a team of 6 special educators and 2 speech and language pathologists, and we provide their special ed services in the settings that they find themselves every day, which could be preschools throughout our area, or child care homes, or sometimes their own home, and sometimes our office. And we're working on helping them overcome some of their challenging areas and prepare them to enter school ready to learn. I was told that you'd be interested in some of the numbers around homeless kids, so 2 of our kids who are on IEPs are also homeless this year. The other aspect of preschool education where many, many more children actually get services are through our publicly funded preschool partnerships. And we've got partnerships with 18 different community-based programs throughout the area that 115 Brattleboro children are able to attend a high-quality preschool that has a contractual partnership with the Brattleboro School District. Those children are in programs that meet the state Act 166 quality standards. And you heard a little bit about Act 166 before. It's Vermont's law providing universal access to preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. In some parts of our state, those preschool programs are right in the school building, so as if they were here in at Academy or Green Street or Oak Grove. But in our region, we don't have preschool in the public schools. We rely on community-based programs to serve the needs of the preschool population. Looking into the future, I don't know if that will change. Right now, I know that kids in Brattleboro don't have the option of attending preschool in a public school setting. But perhaps in the future, we'll be considering some of that. Next, you're going to hear about another big preschool program that children in Brattleboro are able to participate in, and it's Head Start. And I think you may know that there are similarities and differences between the programs that I just talked about and Head Start. I think Deb will explain some of them. One of the big differences is that in early childhood special education and public pre-K, income is not a deciding factor for whether you get services or not. So our services are open to children of all incomes, and in Head Start, the incomes are restricted. But we're similar in that our main goal is to help children grow and develop to the best of their ability and be ready for entering school in our school programs.
And some of the children who are in the EEE program are actually in our Head Start program. So I think everyone here knows that the Early Education Services Head Start and Early Head Start program are an arm of Brattleboro Town School District. So you own that program. Last year I gave you some statistics that I found were quite you were very interested in, and so I wanted to give you again an overview, sort of a demographic picture of some of the families that we're working with, and I've given you a look at the Head Start population as well as the Early Head Start population. Now we are charged with serving the entire county, so these are not all Brattleboro specific, but rather county specific. You can get the general idea, though, that we are dealing with some very stressed families. So currently we have 95 Head Start center-based slots that are primarily based here in Brattleboro at Canal Street, and then we have 2 Head Start classrooms in Westminster. And we have 111 Early Head Start children in our program. Many of them are in classrooms, and some About 50 currently are in our home-based home visiting program, and some of those numbers actually are pregnant mothers. Of that composition, 60 of our Head Start families are headed by a single parent, and 73 are headed by single parent in early Head Start. We have 17 homeless children. These are statistics that were from the catchment area of the fall of 2014 through the end of 2015. Is that right? Yes. So we had 17 Head Start children who were homeless and 30 early Head Start children who were homeless. We have 10 Head Start families who reported they were dealing with substance abuse issue. That's the key word there, those who self-reported. And 13 in early Head Start, 10 who were involved or victims of domestic violence, and 17 in early Head Start. 33 of our Head Start families reported that they accessed mental health supports in that year, and 48 of our early Head Start families did that. We had 7 Head Start parents who were incarcerated last year, and 10 in the early Head Start program. And then we had 50 of our 95 families in Head Start needed emergency assistance to access food, clothing, or shelter last year, and 73 of 111 in our early Head Start program. That's it.
Good question?
Yes.
Just for clarification, do these numbers overlap? In other words, single-parent families, could that be a child in each, so that's really one family with 2 children?
Yes, they could.
So there could be some overlap.
Yes.
Thank you.
And, yeah, any other questions about these?
Yeah, any data on what % of the children are DYS-involved families?
We we're not required to collect that information. These are actually nationally collected figures, but I can tell you that the numbers are probably, they could be as high as 20%, 25%.
What is DYS?
Well, you mean Department of Children and Families?
Yeah,
Yes.
DCF.
Yeah, DCF, yeah. Okay, so this slide tells you our current information that we have collected over 2 periods in the current program year on children's and their development in the areas of social, emotional, physical, fine motor, cognitive, language, literacy, and math. And this is measured through the Teaching Strategies Gold, which is a research-based assessment tool that many programs in the state are using as part of our quality rating system. And the point of this slide is to show you that despite the data that I gave you in the previous slide and the many stressors and challenges that our families and children are experiencing, we are still able to help the children grow in all of those domains. And we have one more collection period that will be coming up in the spring, but clearly you see that each of the areas demonstrate growth.
Back to you.
So at this point, I think we're ready for any questions that people had on the budget. The meeting is billed basically as it's our information night. We also have a little thing going on of Act 46 that we thought we'd spend a little bit of time and pass on some information about that as well. But we wanted to give full due to what would normally happen first and go through the budget. Dr. Corleone?
We asked actually a question about the presentation you just had.
Anything, yeah.
Thank you. Tortolani District 2. I think some children, because of their birth date, they sometimes are at a disadvantage because they're somewhat more immature than others who are older. And I just wonder if there's any flexibility if a professional or a family perceives that the child is not ready for kindergarten or first grade because of his he's a very young 5 or she's a very young 5. Is there any flexibility there in letting them stay back a year if people are all on the same page? I mean, I know kids over the years, they've said, I wish I didn't go to school as early as I did. It's really been tough for me, or that sort of thing. So I just question that. Is there any flexibility there? Is there any way to deal with that issue?
I think the opposite happens. I think parents feel that even though sometimes they're a little early, they'd like to have the full-day programming of a kindergarten program as opposed to stay in pre-K classes. And I think we accommodate that. I mean, we have entry dates and timeframes that we stick to, but if anything, we get more requests about early entrance than holding back. And I think once they're in the school system, we can kind of make those accommodations for, kids that really need more support. Andy, you want to?
Yes, one of the problems are, in order to join kindergarten, you have to be 5 by September 1. So one of the issues for families is that that student who let's say turns 5 in August, that they're no longer eligible for preschool. They're no longer eligible for Head Start or our programs. So for a parent, especially a parent who works, then they don't have an option. But it's interesting because there is data out there, and there was just a report written, I think, in the New York Times a couple of days ago, that students born in the month of August who went to preschool are at an extreme disadvantage, and they have a much higher rate of being diagnosed with ADHD, significantly higher rate of actually being prescribed medication for ADHD than any other month. And stands to reason, if you coach a sport, you'll see the same thing. Kids who are young, who just make the cutoff in t-ball or basketball, they tend to be, it's a generalization, but the least successful. The kids who are older are much better developmentally. It's a huge issue for us to look at as a system and as a nation in the future.
Yeah.
Dortmund was District 3. I just want to sort of follow up on that because I remember when I was working for EES, I had a particular child who was really developmentally delayed, but she was really fine. Like there weren't any learning issues or any of that. It was just that her life circumstances gave her such a slow start in her development. And I just remember having the conversation with the folks at EEE and the administration just saying, God, if she could just stay in preschool one more year, she would probably not need any services. But this is a kid that's probably going to need services for several years, really extensive services, because she's forced to go into kindergarten too early. And and so there's a cost too. So you have a child that gets labeled and a child that needs extensive services, and then there's a cost to the town about having to provide those services, the school system, when maybe they won't need those services if they just had another year to develop naturally.
Have they replaced, there used to be we used to have to bring our kids for a kind of screening before they started kindergarten. Have they replaced that with just arbitrary age limits?
No, we still do the kindergarten screenings.
But we do screenings, but a student who's 5 must be enrolled regardless of the assessment.
Yeah.
The assessment helps us in placement, but it's not a ticket to enter kindergarten. It doesn't exclude children. We have to meet their needs regardless of where they are socially, academically, cognitively.
Unless their need is for an extra year of preschool, then you can meet their needs.
Well, that's a parent decision that we can't make. If the child's 5, then we have to accept that child into kindergarten. The parent can opt to keep a child home or do other things, but we can't.
But they would have to pay for it then?
It's my understanding, yes. Is that right, Deb? 5-year-old.
If they repeated a year in preschool? Well,
If they
Head
repeat
Start.
a year in preschool is not free in our town, so parents would have to pay for that. But parents can make the decision to keep their kids out of kindergarten for a year. That's entirely up to the family. It's not something the school controls. The school has to accept kids who are 5 by September 1st, and they can't turn them away. But parents can always make the decision to keep their kids out of kindergarten for a year.
It's a very rare decision that's made.
Over here,
Hi, I'm Liz McLaughlin from District 3. You mentioned that there were about 50 more students that you could count this year in your budget. Could you explain that a little bit more, and do you think that that's going to continue?
So it's from the Act 166, which was the pre-K legislation that allowed for more students entering the system. And so we got a additional number of students that we could count for what we call average daily membership. So the good thing is it gives us more state aid, and it reduces our taxes when we have more students. We were servicing those students anyway through our private providers and through early and Head Start primarily. We don't see that bump will occur next year. I think it's kind of like a one-time thing. So we can't rely on another, what was the additional number?
It was about another 55.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see another 55 students next year. But it was good this year in terms of helping the budget.
And they're not full-time students.
No, it's actually a .46 full-time equivalent for students.
somebody back here in this corner? Can't see.
Hi, John McKinnon, District 2. 2015, we had 17 students, we're almost, 2016, we have 27. That's almost a 40% increase. We haven't had to deal with the cause of that one. Factors maybe.
Oh, almost, yeah. It's all around us. It's all through Vermont, through the region. It's national. It's a big number is substance abuse. We're in an epidemic of substance abuse, opiate addiction, and so forth in the area and as a nation.
Was there somebody over on this side, all the way over here, in the corner? Sorry, Paul.
If I could just add, I think that's why it's critical that we have such strong partnerships with social service agencies. I mean, it really is important. And this year, we just received a grant from the Agency of Education to be able to fund a social worker here at Academy School. So yeah, that's helped. And we have our HCRS clinicians at each of the schools, and that's a real benefit along with our counseling department or personnel. So it's critical that we have that type of working relationship.
Kip Tewksbury, District 2. I was wondering if somebody could at least outline the disciplinary procedures, particularly with regard to possible suspensions and those things in the lower grades.
Mark, you want it?
Sure. The procedure for a suspension?
Well,
Is that the question?
the procedures that can avoid leading up to and why, when a suspension would be viewed the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah. Really, the only time a suspension would take place is if a child is really unsafe and unable to be in school safely. And when that occurs, it's a child going through a traumatic experience, and we need to bring the families in and work with the families on creating a behavior plan or a safety plan so that that child can be safe in the building. In terms of what we do in our buildings is we focus on positive behavior interventions. So we adopt a climate of common language, common expectations in each setting of the building, of each school, and we teach what those expectations are. So we're lesson planning, we're teaching how to be in school, what you're expected, how you're expected to act in each of the different settings. And really focus on providing positive reinforcement for that.
One thing that's been new the last few years too is through our student leadership that I know Mark at Oak Grove and Jeri, and I know Andy as well, support restorative practices, restorative justice programs. And it's great to see the upper elementary students receive training and practice those training skills to work with their peers on restorative practices.
Thank you.
Was there another question out there? Yes.
Sarah Page, District 2. I have a vague recollection that we as a state stepped away from the Leave No Child Behind way of documenting progress.
I can't quite hear you. Say that again.
Did we as a state step away from the Leave No Child Behind paradigm of documenting progress? And maybe the better question is, up on your charts, we can see that we are making gains, but what are you using to measure gains?
So in a sense, the state didn't walk away, but it pushed the idea of sanctions and penalties that other large states have with some alternative measurements. And so we still are bound by the state assessments and that sort of thing. But I think as one of those slides showed, all of the different assessment measures that we use, including Ames Web, the progress monitoring, we feel like we use multiple measures of assessment as opposed to the state standardized test. We can't ignore those test scores, but we supplement that with these other classroom assessments and grade level assessments. And I'm very proud of Vermont. The Secretary of Education has come out really forcefully on what she called a balanced accountability system. And so we have been implementing that, and I think we do a really good job at that. And but again, you know, we look at the data. It's not just those tests. It's
still the SBAC.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the standardized test. We do have the Smarter Balance assessment.
There is still a standardized test, the SBAC, which they're taking at the high school, what, tomorrow or something?
Next week, the juniors.
Can we go back to one?
But all districts are looked at in the same way. So when we're being compared to other schools, it's apples to apples.
Yes. Yep.
Go ahead up in front. The microphone's coming to you.
Hi, Mike. Is this on?
Yep.
My name is Margot Kunschmidt. I'm District 1. I just had a couple of questions that maybe you can let me know about. First being substance abuse in students and how that's addressed, and if that is addressed in our schools, dropout rates, and then after graduation support, like what's explored, college, vocational schools, and alternatives.
So we're only through, this board only goes through 6th grade.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I imagine that there are occasionally substance abuse issues.
Well, you know, we look at the data from 2nd and 3rd grade in terms of reading, literacy, and math proficiency for projection for our dropout rates in high school. So, I mean, we are a unified system in the sense of our leadership team works very closely together with principals from elementary, middle school, and high school. So, you know, we track that, and those are statistics that kind of give us a sense of, okay, so if our kids are not performing at grade level in the 2nd and 3rd grade, there are going to be problems down the road. I'm glad to see that our numbers are really good. When we get to the high school level in terms of post-high school placement, graduation rates, you know, we're above the state averages. we do have, I'm going to take a little plug for the high school. We have a dual credit programming where we offer now over 50 classes where students can get college credit. And so we have students graduating with 15 to 30 credits going off to college and getting those credits accepted. So it's really because of the base work that is being done here at this level that those students can be so successful.
But I do want to say that there are substance abuse prevention programs, and the kids are talking about that even in early age, first grade, second grade, even starting up. And that through all the schools, or is it just Academy, actually go visit a college to start thinking of college even as fifth graders, yes?
Fifth graders. We took our sixth graders.
And you took the sixth graders, is Oak Grove going to?
Yeah, Keene State next week.
Okay, I'm just highly aware because I have a fifth grader here too. In the back, Dora?
Dora Bubalis, District 3. I noticed in the extended day programs that there's a lot of music great things, which are great, and some physical education. My question is, how much art, physical education, and music education do children get during the regular school day, and how has that changed in, say, the last 5 years?
Andrew,
Well, I'll start with the easy part. It hasn't changed much in 5 years. That schedule's been pretty constant. The number of employees who teach art, music, and PE, that's not changed in our schools. So that's been a constant for quite a few years. It'll vary, but it'll vary by grade and by school. But for the most part, most students get PE twice a week, physical education in the gym twice a week, art once a week, and general music once a week, library science generally once a week, and then band starting in 4th grade is optional. So there's full band and band lessons or instrument lessons that occur each week for students.
And also all schools sing.
And there's also 4 language option in all 3 schools once a week.
And all schools sing goes on for music as well. It's a half an hour for everybody once a week. Was there somebody over here? Yep.
Tad Montgomery, can you give a list of opportunities that children have to interact with nature?
So, Jeri, you want a question?
Every day when you go outside.
Every day when you go outside. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is during our winter sports program, kids are outside. We have at Oak Grove, I can speak for Oak Grove, we have 2 different options, and one is like a wilderness option that they can go and snowshoe, look at tracks and that sort of thing. And we didn't have much snow this year, so it was a lot more in nature. There's also some of our 3rd grade teacher and several of our teachers go up to Fort Dummer because it's an easy walk for Oak Grove students to go up there and to do some other type of science-related, curriculum-related work. I can't necessarily tell you other than they get outside every day, but it's really more local type of field trips that we do in the outdoors as much as possible.
We have the 4 winds programs.
We have a 4 Winds program, which is a parent-led program. So we have volunteer parents at each school who learn science curriculum, and they get that PD together monthly, I believe. And we have volunteer parents who come into our classrooms, teach interactive lessons, take the kids outside often, do experiments in nature. But it's a nice way to bring another aspect of science to the classroom and also to get parents interacting with children as well.
Do you still have gardens? School gardens?
And we have school gardens. At each school we have a garden. Students manage those gardens and under teacher direction.
It's a special
We've
hike
hired
there,
a garden coordinator in the past at Green Street School to help specialize in that. We have shack committees at every school, which really looks at health and wellness of your school. recycling, compost programs. But I feel like we've really very active in being as green as possible and trying to be proactive as we move forward.
And here I would just add that we have a nature trail out, goes up into the woods a little bit, that was actually helped developed by a grant that was written by a parent 3 years ago. So each classroom has an actual station up there that they can walk on it's relatively short, but walk up the nature trail, and there's a little classroom station that teachers, in the good weather, will take kids up there, take their classroom up there and do a variety of activities, including literature, reading, and things like that.
I mean, when the weather is nice, we'll often have classes teach lessons in the garden. So teachers will take their classes outside to provide literacy lessons or science lessons.
Thanks. Ralph Mima, District 3. I'd like to dig a little bit into the seeming counterintuitive findings that even though the schools tended to have higher than average poverty rates or indicators of poverty, that the performance of the students, there was one bar chart in particular that illustrated this, that the performance in a lot of different areas in general was better than the state average. And it's counterintuitive because it's just not what at least I would expect. And I wondered if you had done some analysis to try to figure out why this was the case, if it's a sort of an anomaly that has to do with Brattleboro itself, or is it simply because everybody's just, you're all doing a much better job than the average as well, and basically getting higher performance out of kids who statistically would be expected to perform less well. And the one sort of thing I'm going to throw in as maybe one hypothesis is that if you compare Brattleboro to other pockets of poverty around the state, like for example southern Bennington County or up in the Northeast Kingdom, that in Brattleboro there's probably greater inequality. In other words, there's a much bigger spread from very well-off kids to kids who are in extremely difficult circumstances mixed together in the schools. That might have an effect. I'm not exactly sure how, but that's one thing I can think of that might be different from a school in, say, like I said, southern Bennington County or up in the Northeast. But have you analyzed this?
Not
Well, I'm
only,
gonna let Todd speak, and then I'm going to turn it over to Paul and Lyle.
but not only has that question been asked, but we've been lauded for that, and people have come and asked and analyzed that.
I think the short response is the thing about we're just doing better, right? But this is just my belief, but it's founded in a variety of things. From the interventions, having coaches in literacy and having coaches in math, is that right?
Yeah.
And having this multi-tiered system approach where you're not isolating kids in the basement, so to speak. You're including everyone, everyone's rising. You're giving interventions in the classroom that keep kids in the classroom, included in the general population. You have the student discipline boards, what are they called?
Peer
Restorative justice.
Restorative justice. You have music after school. I mean, in my opinion, you have all these things that I think approach the whole child. And so you're looking really at doing this job of making everyone feel connected. Even people that aren't getting the right food have opportunities to eat in the morning, eat in the afternoon. I know it seems like I'm going all over the place, but I really think it's the all over the approach. In my belief, this district is exceptional at really looking at all these things and understanding that they all play an important role. And I think I'm new to this district 2 years, and it's been, and my kids went through it. They had a great experience, and now I'm finding out why. And it really, I think, has to do with this comprehensive approach of people that care, but also are motivated enough to find answers that are multifaceted, and they support kids in a variety of ways.
Another example is the teachers collaborate together with professional development. We have teacher leaders that receive a stipend to do extra work, to become more expert in the field, and to share that. Is it bi-weekly that the teams meet and go over student work? actually analyze student work and identify issues together, and identify approaches together, because we've got 3 grades in this building and 2 in Green Street and 1 at Oak Grove. We've got 6 teachers in each of the content, in each of the class, the age area, so they can work together. They can actually team, and we've taken advantage of that, and other things that are indicated around the world that are useful. And every time I read about something, or get a report, like the PICUS report was an example that Jill talked about, they talk about all these things you should be doing, and these people have already figured that out. They're already doing it. And
So
that's
this
why
last
the results
bullet
are
is
what
that PICUS report, things like strong leadership, common curriculum, focus on student outcomes, collaboration among staff. I mean, those are just, it's
It's not an
intentional.
accident.
Yeah, it's not an accident.
One of the quotes up there, the culture of responsibility, that came through very loud and clear in the PICUS report, that teachers are responsible for their students, principals empower them to do the work that needs to be done, and they all take it seriously, and like, I'm a good teacher and I can do it and it's my responsibility. We have amazing teachers who work so hard that I couldn't be prouder of the people that we have hired and work here.
In terms of larger research, there's a body of research that talks about the so-called 90-90-90 schools. That is, schools that are 90% free and reduced, 90% students of color, and yet scoring 90% proficiency. It's sort of it's a model, but in other words, those mostly urban schools that were going very much against the expectation in terms of given their poverty levels and levels of diversity in school. And the components that come out of that research are those components. Similarly, Vermont did a study several years ago, right around the time we were initiating many of the practices that we're talking about, that looked at those schools that were going against that hypothesis of low poverty means low scores. None of the schools in Wyndham Southeast was selected. There were other schools, but across the state, because the desire was to have some research on our context, the rural Vermont context. Exactly the same measures, leadership, strong professional development, looking at data, regular review of student work, student effort. All of those components also came up in that study. So really for me, it's this, the PICUS report is simply confirming all of those prior studies.
In the back? That's you.
Hi, it's Paul Milton, District 1. So I am, aside from being a rep, I'm also on the Finance Committee. And personally, like, I would double my taxes to continue the good work the schools are doing, but as a Finance Committee member, I have to do due diligence and ask hard questions about how you're spending the money. So I guess one of the questions that I was hoping to get answered is one of the questions that was on our report that we distributed, which is basically like, if we were going to cut your budget, like some people have a sentiment that it's just too much, like we want to cut it. What would you have to continue? You know, there are all these regulations, local, state, and federal regulations about what you must provide. So can you just speak a little bit to, can you try to put a number on what it would actually cost per student to just do the bare minimum?
I don't have a number. Does anybody have a number?
Well, I would say it would cost you a lot more, significantly more each year thereafter, because to get the results that we're talking about, to keep kids in school, to deal with the issues that we deal with today in school, that if we trim those programs, trim the number of adults who we employ, then we're going to be paying a lot more money for kids to go elsewhere, to go to out-of-district placements, which can run anywhere from $35,000 per student to over $100,000 per student. So all these efforts bring those kids back. Right now, for example, we do things that schools didn't do when the adults in the room went to school. In kindergarten, we're very good at toilet training. We toilet train students because a lot of our students do not get toilet training at home. So we have to toilet train those kids in order to be in school. That takes people, and that takes human resources. So some of the things we do cost more money than, and add to our budget. So we cut those things out. We're going to lose a lot of kids. And we're going the opposite way and actually doing amazing work when we're maintaining students who come to school who aren't ready on any given day, who come to school with who've been traumatized, who've been victimized by their situations. And we have people who can help keep them in school, because we have no choice. Those kids have to be here, and we need them here. But if we cannot make our schools meet their needs, then they're going to go somewhere else. Or they're going to fail, they're not going to do well. And there's a tremendous cost for that. So we can talk about different things that we could cut out. We could cut out after-school programming. We could cut the bus for after-school programming and save $10,000 a year. But then the tutoring that's helping kids who need more than what goes on in the classroom, so they can be proficient in math, they won't get that because there's no way they can get home from school at 4:15. We can cut the after-school program, and then all the extra things that the kids are doing, they won't get to do. And those 26 kids that we brought back from private schools won't come back. They'll stay there, and that costs us money. And one of the dangers, in a system like ours, you're right, we do. We are fortunate because we are able to maintain our middle-class students here. And we're 60-something% of our kids come from impoverished backgrounds. But the real danger in public ed, and it happens in cities all over the country, is when you lose those middle-class kids, your system is doomed, your property taxes are doomed, and you can look around and you can see communities within 20 miles that have gone through that. Greenfield, Mass. has gone through that, where it's a heck of a hard battle to bring your town back. So we have to keep those middle-class kids here. We have to offer things that are good for all kids, but are particularly attractive to those students and their parents, like our foreign language, like all of our music programs, after-school sports, drama. We have over 100 students involved in drama right now in our schools. So those kind of things are good for all kids, but they appeal to those students who are average or above, and we have to have a system for them as well. So, long-winded answer, I apologize, but...
Dave wanted to add on to that?
Yeah, just in terms of the kind of things that happen here, that we also have some pretty strong partnerships in the community, particularly with the Brattleboro Music Center and the New England Youth Theater, both of which provide very reasonably priced and pretty extensive programs in the schools, and it makes a wonderful difference, and it's not just for those middle class kids that Andy was talking about, but all the kids here are involved in those programs, and it's very carefully administered that way, so that's the case, which would not be true if we weren't making those partnerships with the community.
Any more questions out there? Yes, Andy.
Hi, Andy Davis, District 3. I had a couple of questions about physical plant stuff, both from a financial and an environmental point of view. I noticed in the budget that the electricity is now under net metered electricity. All the numbers got drained out of the electricity line and put in net metering. Is there an update on how that program is going? They're all the same numbers. I'm just wondering, are there savings? Are we switching to solar? I know there was... Do I need to go to a different meeting to get that answered?
No, Frank's going to give it.
Yeah, so the Brattleboro Town Board was one of the early adopters of the net metering opportunity. I think it was 2013 that a contract was initiated. And it's in place. So the developer is Next Sun Energy, and They did create the solar array that generated electricity, and the Brattleboro Town School System is benefiting from that as a 10% discount on what we pay the utility.
I'm wondering, that's also an educational opportunity. I think our students, maybe some of the older ones, might be interested in that whole process there. Another thing I noticed, fuel oil. I noticed that the number dropped considerably at Academy, and I know we have this new boiler, but I couldn't find any line item for buying the pellets. Is that in the budget? I couldn't find it. I just saw the oil had dropped from $50,000 a year to $30,000 a year, but I couldn't find the cost of any of the pellets in the budget. But I'm assuming we're buying the wood and not stealing it?
Right, yes, we did. I hope we would.
Maybe there's something you don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll find it in our...
But is that the main reason for the drop in $20,000 on fuel oil? Is switching to the pellet boiler?
Yes, we did intend to. We know that historically pellet and wood energy is about... well, wood chips are about a third of the cost of historical oil, and pellets are about 2/3 of the cost, because there is a different BTU relationship there.
I saw the oil is on 161 for Academy, and I just didn't see any.
Yeah, so that represents both pellets and oil. So the 30,000. It goes from 50 down to 30. That $20,000 savings reflects the lower cost of both fuels, and we should change that description. So
to fuel.
To fuel, yes.
Yeah, fuel, pellet,
yes.
And oil. Okay, so that clears up that. Thank you. I think that's great. And that could be another educational opportunity for the students to be understanding that switch over. And I think, did you talk at all about looking at Oak Grove and Green Street? I got here a little late, about maybe trying to find ways to do something similar in those buildings. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
The last thing is just, I heard a report on the radio this week with everything happening in Flint, Michigan. There was a report on NPR that there are many schools across our nation that actually have a lead problem in their water because of old plumbing fixtures, and there's very few, in many states, there's very few regulations that this even needs to be monitored or tested. And I was just curious, has there been any examination? We have pretty old buildings here. You know, I know Oak Grove and Green have been around quite a while. I think Oak Grove is probably our oldest building other than Canal. But has anyone looked at that, Ron? Has there been a testing of the water for that? Because sometimes it comes from fixtures and old piping, and it's not the water supply, but it's the water delivery.
So our custodial staff have some people that are trained to do the water testing, and so that happens on a regular basis at all the schools.
Okay, and so are there like reports someplace where they've been tested for lead?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, all public water systems were required. About maybe 10 years ago, there was a major state initiative from the Agency of Natural Resources that required a process, and
in Vermont.
In Vermont, yeah, and so all public schools had to go through a compliance review, a fairly rigorous testing for lead. So I'm relatively new to this system, so I don't have the specifics of where they found conditions and what were the interventions, but it has been a requirement, and I can look into what date and what were the conditions that
So
were.
maybe Vermont's ahead of the curve. I was surprised to hear, we get this news cycle that focuses on a place like Flint, and then you find out that it's really a problem in many other places, and it just hasn't been. So.
Can I follow up? I heard the same. I heard George Garvin, District 1. I heard the same report that Andy's talking about, and I was interested in one of the. They found it was important where they tested the water. The water in the kitchen was fine; it got used steadily. But that water on that drinking fountain way at the far end of the hall, where the water sat 2 days before it ever, that had problems. So regardless of the testing plan here, Andy was giving me a thought that the schools and the board perhaps have an opportunity to, given what's going on in North Bennington, to publicize, just, oh, by the way, folks, this is our regular water testing process, and this is what we're finding, in case you were wondering.
Thanks,
Dr. Tortolani in the back.
Yeah, just a statement. I want to thank all you teachers, members of the school board, and administrators for the work you're doing to educate our children. We really appreciate it. Two questions. One has to do with the salary level of our teachers and whether we're keeping up with the average in the state, or whether we might be losing teachers to other districts because of our salaries not keeping up. And the other question I have is just a general question about this meeting. I just wondered if we could perhaps rotate it so that we could see the other schools, Green Street and Oak Grove, have a meeting there. We have about 50 to 60 people here at this meeting. I think you could probably find a place to accommodate it. It'd be nice to have our principals show off their schools too. Thank you.
So I'll answer the question about salaries. I think we are competitive with certainly the neighboring supervisory unions, and also considering places like Keene in Western Massachusetts. You know, I just saw a report on some of the states like general salaries in Massachusetts, Connecticut. You know, we're never going to be at that level. But you know, in terms of attracting teachers, we've had substantial turnover the last 3 or 4 years, and I know the last 2 years, we've hired 30 new teachers. And so they're coming in with master's degrees, probably 2 or 3 years of experience, maybe up to 5 years of experience, and they're, you know, I think we're competitive with the surrounding areas. The location of the meeting, we could do that.
I think what we just found out in our, well, we've known this for a while, but we had another more information about it earlier in the meeting. The place where the problem is in preschool. The people with the same qualifications to teach as our classroom teachers are not getting, I won't estimate the percentage, but they're not getting anywhere near a professional teacher salary. And as a consequence, it's very hard to find good people, it's very hard to keep them. And that's the most crucial time. I mean, that's preschool education and election reform are the two biggest problems facing our nation. And we're not paying those people adequately.
So if there's no more questions on the budget, I'd like to segue over to Act 46. And I don't know how long you all want to be here or how long you want to hear. Last chance for anything on the budget and first thing. All right, so I have, anybody on the board want to say anything else on the budget? Or? No?
We're trying to manage your money responsibly.
So I have a bit of an analogy to stew. So anybody who didn't have supper, prepare yourselves. So when Act 46 passed in the Vermont legislature, it was as if the Vermont lawmakers said to the school boards, you can no longer afford steak, make stew. And if you make your stew fast enough, we'll even give your town some money. Oh, and by the way, if you do not make stew in a few years, we'll make it for you. So in November, our supervisory union voted to form a study committee which looks at all the options of the different types of stew, or the types of merger possible under the Vermont law. The mandate also came with two main goals: improve equity to students and, if possible, decrease cost to taxpayers. So when making a stew, you quickly realize that not everyone can put in everything. And sometimes we even have to take things out, and others decide they want to put more things in. But our goal on this study committee is to make the best dang stew we can. Now there's some people that are just not happy about stew. And perhaps there's some vegetarians who don't like the stew because there's meat in it, or there's maybe somebody allergic to carrots, and we put them in and they're never going to like our stew. But while we're making the stew, we have some taste testers too. There's a bunch of people who come to the meetings, or there's people that send in comments. In fact, we have a stew tasting scheduled for you all on April 6th for anybody who'd like to come here in Brattleboro. We listen, and we may take out some salt, we may add in some pepper. Hopefully we're not throwing out the recipes, say, to go from beef stew to lamb stew after so much work on the recipe. But the recipe's not yet fixed at this point. And by May 17th, we must send the recipe for our stew up to the State Board of Education for approval. And then we'll be sending it out to the voters for more taste testing and more input. And at that point, that's when we'll have town forums that will be in each of the communities in the supervisor union. Then finally, before June 30th, probably around mid-June, we go to a vote, which is the final approval of the stew. You like that? Does it make sense to anybody? So, you've got, so we can look at this and walk through real quickly. I can't do it standing this way. Stand so close, I guess. So, if we look at this, the goals are to provide substantial equity and a variety of educational opportunities statewide. And it's a statewide law, and there are more inequities in some systems than in ours. You can probably imagine that, thinking of our state. Lead students to achieve or exceed the state education quality standards, maximize operational efficiencies through increased flexibility to manage, share, transfer resources with the goal of increasing the district level ratio of students to staff. Promote transparency and accountability, and all of it delivered at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. It's quite the stew, let me tell you. Striving for equity. Did I click it twice?
Go back one. Yep.
I missed one?
Yep. Tax incentives and grants.
Not there. Here, it's there. All right. Tax incentives and grants are available to assist with the governance changes. Unification is expected to lower the operating costs of the unified entity and increase educational opportunities in the supervisory union schools. Subsidies are provided to lower the transition cost. And a preliminary analysis of current supervisory staffing versus this PICA study of adequate funding for Vermont schools indicates that we would likely see cost reductions due to more efficient use of staff resources. Currently, we're comprised of 7 separate employers as a district. So one of the first questions that we've been asking ourselves is are we equitable? How do we look at what's equitable? And let me tell you that every one of these discussions can go on for a very long time, and the people that are on the study committee, we've put in more hours than any of us ever dreamed we would be putting in. And they're all published on the BC TV. Some people have been watching them, and I think they're probably highly entertaining for everyone. If you look at the average of proficiency, for example, in literacy, on this, what replaced the NECAP, that's now the SBAC test that's mandated. If you take our district as a whole, with the 3 schools all put together, you're at 56%. Dummerston slightly outdid us at 57. Guilford's 32, Putney's 36, Vernon's 38, and the whole state of Vermont's 44, so we did pretty well.
What age range is that?
This is
3rd through 6th.
This test, I kind of would like us, we didn't prepare a million things for you tonight, but I think it's also valid to go back and look a couple years ahead of this, because the SBAC was only taken for the first time last year. It's a test that's taken on computers, so it took kids a little bit more time to not maybe more time, but it's a different way of taking a test than what they were used to. But and Lyle was saying to me earlier when I said, well, what about that other figure that we're talking about? She said, well, that's going to take several hours to pull together. And these are the types of things that
You get asked at 4 o'clock.
Yeah. But they've been talking about giving it to us in an Ames Web, for example, comparison. But we're trying, as a study committee, we're trying to look, what is exactly the results that we're getting in one town and what we get in another town? And why is that? Margaret?
Well, not to be. So looking at numbers like this, I mean, is that weighted for the fact that the size of the Guilford school population is so much smaller than the size of the Brattleboro town population, and very few children can really skew that number one direction or another?
So we took an average. Frank helped me do this, so maybe Frank, you can speak to how we did this, because we talked about the cohort effect, where a very low class can bring down a small school, or a very high class could skew it the other way.
Yeah, so this data is in our annual report. the Wyndham Southeast annual report. And so we do have the data by each grade level and school. And we know that this is a glance at one period, 1 year. It's the 2015 assessment period. And so that in itself typically would not be something that we would say, hey, look, here are the conditions that we work within. However, this data is available over several years, and we have looked at this in years past, and this is not out of the ordinary. This is representative of what we've seen in several years. But you're absolutely right. With small school sizes, you can have a small grade level that substantially changes.
I want to stress the timeline of this because it is so much a work in progress still. So we really formed the study committees in November, and I didn't put all of that on. But we have been meeting incredibly regularly. and from this board, there's Kim and Mark and I, and David is our alternate. Todd is welcome to come and to listen, as well as all of the other boards have similar. Everybody else is one person that's their actual voting member and an alternate, and then their boards can come as well. We've been meeting since November bi-weekly. I think somewhere around January we took it on for weekly, and that's kind of where we've remained. We've become very good friends, all of us on the study committee. So we completed, there's an executive summary and articles of agreement, which is kind of a legal document that we're stomping our way through, and that's one of the things that we'll look at in this town forum. Discusses such mundane things as transfer of property. Putney has a forest that Mark wants to log. We're teasing.
Yeah, pellet boilers.
But there's different things that come in legally, obviously, when you're trying to put a group together. It also discusses such things as school closures, which are not anticipated. But we want to make sure it's addressed, how that would possibly happen. It addresses such thing as who would be on this new board, what the representation would look like. We address, I don't know, what else I'm remembering the things that are more
school-based.
Leadership council and how we would have a vote on the budgets. So all of those have had lots of conversation. I don't know that we're getting very close on some of them, but we haven't slammed it down and said it's a done deal on any one of those specific topics. If you had a question on those topics, Annie, I'll go back to the timeline.
Yeah, have you addressed at all the issue of governance? Governance, because I'm appalled at the attendance at high school meetings and encouraged by the attendance at local school meetings. And I think if you went to a board like this, you would not have, you'd have the same attendance as you do at high school meetings, and that would really be appalling. And I don't know if you've considered the possibility of a representative school meeting that's elected in the same way.
Yeah.
Good.
So this has been a big concern, and it's a bigger concern, I would say, to the outlying towns that are used to their town meeting being in a different format than what we all are used to in Brattleboro. So one of the things that I personally am encouraged on is the leadership council idea. So that would be each school. As it is currently, we have a school board for essentially 4 schools here. I'm standing right in front of you, Drew, isn't it? And so the leadership council would become one leadership council for Academy, one for Green Street, one for Oak Grove. And it would be comprised, Kim did a lot of writing on that one, it was comprised of staff.
There would be a school board member on the super board, one person attached to each school. The principal would be involved, and then there would be elected citizens that would be on the advisory committee as well, that the towns would individually elect to represent each school, so that they're able to voice their concerns and encourage what they need going forward. You know, if there's a program that, say, Andy or Mark or Jerry wanted to present, they would be the advocates for their school.
But how would it be governed? Would it be like the high school where you have theoretically, I don't know how many thousand people and 30 show up? Or would it be like, in fact, the Brattleboro representative town meeting where 90% of the representatives, or 95, show up?
That's still one of the things we're discussing and fleshing out a little bit. As it is currently, we have the leadership councils, and I think, did we say too, there's staff and teachers, or,
Yes.
administrators and teachers on that as well, which that currently doesn't exist, that sort of interaction in some sort of an advisory role, except on policy council from EES by law that exists. So then, and then the overall board would be elected. What's currently on there is 2 people from Brattleboro, 1 from each of the outlying towns, and 2 members at large. So then you would have your leadership council, as Kim's saying, flowing back up to the super board with information and concerns, and you would have the overall board, much like the BUHS board now, that would have more representation coming in. And then the votes, which is a big concern of this type of a discussion, and when you would have that, you would still have an informational night, and you would have the leadership councils actually talking to each of the schools, and the super board, we nicknamed it that, I don't think it'll probably stay with that.
Yeah, that's not going to be that. It's like the unified Union High School board.
That board would also
More
come
like
with,
malfunction junction, it's going to be the super board.
there would be a larger board, and they would also come and present what's going on with the overall budget and be able to pull out what's actually directly in each school. And then the vote on the budget, we've discussed on how it would be done. I think the current idea is that it would be presented at this sort of a meeting, and then again at another meeting that would be just for that actual budget and that vote.
And would be, my prediction is, abysmally attended in the same way the high school meeting is.
But at the high school now, you don't have a town information about it. There's no, you have to kind of go out of your way to search for it. The difference would be that this budget would come before a town meeting body for information, but it wouldn't be voted on at the town meeting. That's still up for discussion. That can be part of the salt and the pepper. Still going on. Mr. Wheeler?
You've been saying budget and budgets. Am I confused? I think I'm confused. There would be one overall budget, not a budget, a portion of which is discussed and voted on by Guilford and one by Vernon. Okay.
No, it's one massive budget.
Right, but each, and it passes or fails not in individual towns, but in the entire conglomeration, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Dora?
So I would have concerns about sort of equitable. I mean, one of the reasons why the high school system doesn't work is because, one, people feel it's not, it doesn't make any difference because nothing's ever going to happen to the budget. People are going to pass it, and that's, you know, so why bother? But also because generally it's in Brattleboro, and it's hard for people who are in the outer towns to get into Brattleboro to go to a meeting. I mean, a lot of people in Brattleboro don't go either. So, I mean, I would strongly advocate that the vote on the budget be by Australian ballot on town meeting day. That you can have your informational meetings, and your informational meetings should be in more than one location, because you're grouping a bunch of towns together. And the vote be by Australian ballot. That's the problem with the high school system.
That's still on the table, that, like I said, we haven't
Yeah.
slammed down. That is one of the other thoughts.
I hear that. That's why I'm advocating. Because I think we don't, I mean, this representative town meeting system has a lot of flaws. And one of the flaws is we're having a really hard time getting people to be reps right now. So, I mean, so then you put that system in the schools and it creates a whole another, level.
Over here.
George Carmel, District 1, and I recently moved back to Brattleboro after many years in New Hampshire. I can understand the desire for an Australian ballot countywide, or whatever we call this thing. I would only caution that a number of years ago, New Hampshire passed what is known as SB2, Senate Bill 2, which essentially did away with town meeting and put everything up to Australian ballot vote for all the people in all the towns. For those people, I think it's probably most of the people in this room who value good quality education and good town government, it was an unmitigated disaster everywhere. I can go on if somebody wants to, but I firmly believe, having witnessed it, that putting something like this up to Australian ballot to every voter everywhere is a terrible idea.
How was it a disaster?
The basic problem is you end up with the people who don't read the issues, don't care about the issues, simply go in and vote no.
Exactly.
So that, I mean, as you guys can quickly see, that there's differences of opinion, and you can imagine the study committee. So, but the town meeting piece really has occupied quite a bit of commentary from other towns, particularly the smaller towns that have a true town meeting vote right there, and not a representative system like we do in Brattleboro. I guess the thing we didn't talk about at all is one of the, what else is there for options, and that's one of the things we're still looking at. This timeline takes us through for accelerated merger. There's, I think the paper said 12 options that we had on a big chart at one point. The accelerated merger is kind of the carrot stick type thing from the government, and the Vermont legislators dangled out accelerated merger. If you pass this and put it into place in operation by July 1, 2017, am I right, Ron? Yep. Then we have a tax incentive of 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, decreasing each year. So we all, on all the school boards, have felt that that means we need to look at that for the taxpayer. It didn't mean that we all said, yes, we were definitely doing it. It just meant that we were looking at it. And so this timeline is based on what we would have to do to meet that deadline. And that's what we've been working towards. We have not, again, slammed down the mantle and said that we are definitely going for an accelerated merger. There's some questions we're still hammering out, but this is the timeline of what would happen, and again, it would come back. So there's Brattleboro Town Forum 1 that we have scheduled, and then there's Brattleboro Town Forum 2, which would we definitely be having, and then all of the towns would be having, so that we would actually know. I mean, I have hesitated as a board chair to schedule a lot of forums. Other towns have had more forums, but we don't know what we actually are putting out for possible vote. So at this point, to have a lot of forums to tell you what we're doing, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. However, other towns have had more people coming to tell us all their fears right away and concerns. Chad?
Jill, could you quickly and concisely explain what the problem is that Act 46 is trying to solve?
Money.
That's it, Margaret's got it. It's all over the state, and this is something that we've seen for many years. Okay, so in the aggregate, our supervisory union since 2004, is that the number, Ron? We have had a decrease of 23% of actual student numbers, and I allude to that in my report that I wrote, and I didn't really go over it tonight. 23% down, so we're down, but as we've talked about too, when you're down 2 kids and your classroom goes from 18 to 16, you don't close the classroom. So you still increase your cost because you have less kids coming in here, but you're not going to be able to really close a classroom. When you look at this sort of a merger throughout the supervisory union, and we look at the supervisory union first because that's the mandate for accelerated merger, that's how you qualify. Every town in the supervisory union has to come together. Then you can start sharing. For instance, right now Vernon has one classroom of 25 kids and 2 teachers. Because 25 is too many for one, but really enough for 2? No, but what else did they do? How else do they handle that? Whereas of that same grade, I believe Guilford has 13. So gee, putting them together might make a lot of sense, right? That sort of thing can happen through this merger. Some argue that it could happen now. Others argue that you can't. That's another one of the discussions that we have. Exactly what is possible. If we do hire back and forth with sharing, Andy Davis is one of those examples that has a part-time job here and then in another district, which is not part of our supervisory union. But we definitely have that. We're looking at a music teacher position that's shared right now for someone who's retiring. That we share, you guys are sharing. So some of what happens in Act 46 is already happening in Brattleboro because we have 3 schools. Quite frankly, we have what's considered a small school with Oak Grove with 100 kids. And some of the outlying towns are at 100 kids as well, and they're scared that, big Brattleboro evil people that we are want to come slam and close their schools because they see themselves as vulnerable at 100 kids. But we also have a school of 100 kids. And the reason that we can maintain all of the programming that we have is because we have 3 schools, and we can spread those costs out amongst the 3 schools. So we can maintain one school that's substantially smaller than the other one. I mean, essentially, we have 400, 300, and 100, and a little bit off. Is that concise enough? It's looking at consolidating, but it's also looking at being equitable. Right now, and I allude to that, or state it actually in what I wrote, we give a lot of programming that the other schools don't have. When you ask the question of what are we doing that's getting these results, some of the other towns are from outlying towns just in our own supervisory union are visiting our schools and saying, wait a minute, we're not getting these results. What are you guys doing? And they can't afford it. When they look at it to put a program in place for that number of kids, 100 kids that cost, I don't know, $200,000, what is it? Frank's back in just as he walks in, I can ask him to do the math, but you can all do it in your minds, What does it cost when you divide that out for 100 kids as opposed to all of our kids? Marshall.
Marshall Wheelock, District 2. You mentioned what the carrot in this whole process is, the 10-cent decrease followed by an 8-cent, 6-cent decrease in our state school taxes. Could somebody give a cogent explanation about what the stick is?
If you don't do anything in 4 years, they'll do it for you. The state will decide how to merge. Now, that's the way the law reads right now. There's some who are convinced that the law will be changed, that it's an election year, that perhaps that'll change. But that is how the law looks right now. Other people say, look, if it was going to change, it would have changed since they closed last June and they've already made it through a session and they didn't close or didn't change anything. It remains as it is.
There is an option to remain as you are and show that you can reach those goals. So it's not inevitable that the state is going to tell us. The other stick, though, is that, I'm sorry.
Each town would have to reach the goals, or?
Yes. Yeah.
You have to prove that you're equitable and you're doing all of the things
that we're doing
that make a good system.
But the other stick is that for small schools, years ago, the legislature decided that we really value these schools, so we have small school grants. And it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars to some of the schools around the state. Those grants go away if you don't either merge or demonstrate through self-study that you're reaching those goals.
Just a couple things, because I have a question, but I also think, going back to thinking about the structure, I'm guessing that a topic of conversation is probably the smaller towns being concerned about being dominated by Brattleboro.
A lot of discussion.
And I heard you say something about the idea of at-large spots on this group. Yes. And chances are at-large positions are going to be dominated by Brattleboro, just from a population standpoint.
It could be, but the way the at-large is set up right now is everybody in the supervisory union, anybody could run, and everybody would vote on those at-large positions.
Yeah.
So population-wise, sure, it would.
From a population standpoint, it's like the difference between a ward-based system in a city versus at-large tends to be dominated by the people of wealth and white, as opposed to a ward-based system, which allows a little more diversity. So I was just wondering if maybe some sort of proportional regional type of at-large position as opposed to just a whole at-large.
Well, the
You know.
original, where we started was what we thought the law mandated, which was by population strictly. But that does mean that we control the board, and that is a concern, a large concern. And so in the making of the stew, we've given on that. One of my large concerns was school veto power or community veto power over school closure. And the smaller towns were worried that we would close a school without enough input from them, and they wanted to have veto power over a school closure, which again, none are planned because we're all at a level that they can be sustained. But if we continue to decrease in population as we have, and we are completely, or there's a huge other reason that maybe something needs massive infrastructure, whatever. I didn't feel it was right that one town could say to everybody else, no, I'm keeping my school and that's it, you must pay, because we're all paying. So part of our stew making was the balance of that board being set with a at-large memberships and then not having school veto power after 5 years. School closure veto power. And we've also upped the vote has to be a supermajority in order to close a school. And there's a very long process. I mean, it would not be taken lightly to close any school. And
there is one town in our supervisory union that has some school choice element.
yes, Vernon.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak of the specific, but is that a bone in the soup that we have to, that's been a problem?
It's a very large bone without any way to break it down.
Yeah.
It's the law started in 1954, and it was it's an exception. It's based for Vernon. They can have school choice. They have school choice for 7th through high school graduation. The money follows the child, so they pay the state average, and child can choose. The parents can choose where the child will go, and then if the cost of the education is $18,000 and you're getting, I don't know, 12 or 14, you're only paying 4 and you're getting the private school. That's very hard. And we've talked about it. We've talked about how to give the way it comes together, everybody has to be equitable. So either they give up school choice and when they come in, because that exemption in the law only exists for them as they are their own district. When we form a bigger, all-encompassing district, they would no longer have that extension. So we could write into the Articles of Agreement that all of us get school choice. We've looked at that with some financial implications, and we did not feel that was as a study committee, that was a viable option. So where we are now at the moment, again, the stew-making process is that it would be put to the voters if we study committee decides. There's a study committee vote there somewhere in the end of April probably. And if we decided to go forward with the accelerated merger, Vernon would get to have that choice in a vote, whether they wish to join or not. And if they chose not to, or if any other town chose not to join, Brattleboro chose not to join, then they would become standalone districts.
And would that affect the tax savings for the districts that did decide to join?
Yes.
The dime is gone.
The dime is gone. We only get the dime if we all play nice. And we all make a stew we can agree to.
By July 1st.
By July 1st.
There are other options that could come from this that would still maintain an 8-cent, 6-cent board, and 2-cent tax break.
So for example,
So modified union district with one district staying out, they don't get the incentive, the other districts do. So there's a number of alternatives, and I think April 6th is, we're gonna kind of provide an overview about those options.
One of the things about the law that doesn't get a lot of publicity, but was clearly included, is that all of the incentives, all the study grants, all the money that's going to be spent on encouraging this process is added to the ed fund, which means that we will be paying ourselves in order to give ourselves the tax incentive. And by the time it gets to, if half or 3/4 of the school districts, by the time it's in a couple of years, when the deadlines come along, have signed up for some sort of a merger and everybody's getting 8 cents, nobody's going to get anything.
But those who don't sign up for a merger definitely don't.
They have to pay anyway.
Yeah.
Which is why the law's going to change.
Was there anybody besides Dora over here? Go ahead then. Oh, sorry. Let me take him first because he hasn't talked.
I just, maybe obvious, but the merger, when done, would mean then a unified per pupil cost that
Yes.
in relation to,
And per pupil equity and opportunities of programming. So one of the concerns Brattleboro brought to this equation as well, to the stew-making project, was we are pretty proud of our programming, and we feel, as we've shown you tonight, that it's achieved a lot of great things, and we don't want to go backwards. We're happy to share, so we're looking at how does that work, and how do we bring everybody up without the other costs. So we're trying to plan, figure out cost.
so there could be tax, definitely tax implications for other towns doing that from what they're doing now?
Well, it's one budget for everybody, so we're
Right.
all sharing that cost. Right now, well, I don't think we have that on the slide. We have that information, but it would be in the other form. But right now, we are the lowest tax of everybody.
Vernon's lower.
No.
Vernon is
Guilford is lower?
Vernon, yes.
They get because of
This year?
the
Yes.
money they're still getting.
Yeah, right.
For this year. So, but we're still one of the lowest taxed towns, but we also give, I think it's fair to say, the highest programming level.
I think it's important to point out that probably the primary reason that our taxes are so low and we have these extra programs is the $4.5 million that we get from the state and federal government to support the children that are in poverty. If we didn't have that, our taxes would be significantly higher. And the kind of what you're getting at, Kip, is that the amount spent per student will be the same, and the tax rate per $100 or $1,000 will be the same. And since ours is the lowest, ours is going to go up the most to cover that gap.
Well, he says that. We have to say that there's disagreement amongst all of us on these things too. So just to be clear.
When you say the amount spent per student is the same, in fact, if we merged with those schools and they were to take advantage of some of the opportunities, theater and whatever, transportation costs would escalate drastically to bring students from Putney, Vernon, Guilford into some of the services available in Brattleboro.
Well, they would have services in their schools. There's another possibility. And obviously additional cost, which again is disproportionately comes from our taxes.
Maybe. So those types of questions are the ones that we're trying to flush out and trying to see. It's also looking in a crystal ball. Somebody asked at one of the meetings, he says, well, what's the population going to be in another 10 years? How do you know it's going to go down? You know, there's some things that you just don't know. And to all of us on the study committee, I think it comes back to a couple of questions that are very solid. What is good for the kids and what is good for the taxpayer? And that's the reason for this. And how do we look at it? How do we make the best stew we can? Again, I want to stress that all of us on the board are in full agreement that we thought it was worthwhile to look at this because of the possibility of tax relief for our voters. We thought that was part of our charge as being elected officials. So that's why we've gone into this. And from there, we probably have differing opinions of how excited we are, how concerned we are about different pieces and what is most important to each of us. And then you can imagine there's different opinions from everybody else. Truly, if you want some entertaining television, watch our meeting.
It's all on BCTV.
Yes, and tomorrow, we have a meeting tomorrow, and Secretary Holcomb is actually coming to the meeting.
So the Secretary of Agriculture, Rebecca Holcomb, is coming to
Education, not agriculture. We're not in Illinois.
Not making the stew.
No.
Education, she'll be there in Putney tomorrow. Were there any more questions, or shall we sum it up for tonight? You can all come in April 6th. It's getting late. Last one, Dora?
Just a question I had before. So have you guys looked at the idea of possibility creating magnet schools?
We floated that once. We haven't really spent much time on it. That's, to me, seemed really hard to look at that while looking at the mergers and such. But certainly some people have suggested that maybe that would be one of the things that happens later on down the road. Right now, we've concentrated on looking at what happens if we all merge together. Does it make sense if only some of us merge? For example, all the elementary schools except for Brattleboro, or all of just the elementary schools and leave the high school. There was one sheet at one point that I think had 12 different options of what maybe makes sense. And so we all try to think about it. Truly, if you have nothing else to do, you can occupy a lot of brain cells.
Thank you.
First of all, the building's, maybe 60,000 square feet, but it's a non-insulated building. We have huge walls. We have basically single pane classroom walls to exterior walls that are single pane glass. So we're very inefficient in terms of that regard. And right now we don't have, so we have a brand new state-of-the-art heating system, wood pellet and oil, but we have antiquated control system. So we're one zone. We have one zone. So if we wanted to turn the heat on, if it's a really cold night tonight, we wanted to turn the heat on in the music room where we're gathered, we'd have to turn the heat on in the entire building. So every classroom would go up to whatever temperature we set, which is very inefficient. That's an issue that's being addressed through additional work on the control systems as we speak, actually.
So that won't have to happen.
Right.
And that's, you're able to take care of that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the
That was
clean
gonna
energy
be-
fund.
That was a nice surprise. I thought we were going to have to wait for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens, and it's happened when school buildings or other buildings go to these big boiler systems, is that the controls for this don't work well with the older controls. So there's, in this room we produce, these boilers produce the heat, but now the issue is, well, how do you get the heat to the rest of the buildings and do it efficiently and do it so you can control like zones or classrooms, and that's
That's going to be matched up and
right. That's stage 2.
Steam or hot water?
Hot water.
Hot water.
Yep. It's a hot water boiler system. Right. I was going to answer. Wood chips systems are much bigger. So wood pellets systems are smaller. So if we were much like Brattleboro Union High School, Middle School, Career Center, that's a wood chip facility, a wood chip building. 350,000 square feet there versus about 60,000 square feet here. So much smaller capacity.
Sort of fantasy on a ship.
So this huge tank right here is the buffer tank. So that the hot water that goes warm comes into this buffer tank, and that actually goes out and heats the school building. And this is the domestic hot water tank here. Right, well, we're heating from here. And this is the oil system, a new oil boiler that pretty much uses backup, but using conjunction with the wood pellet. So this is capable of heating the entire building on its own. And as the two wood pellet boilers are capable of heating the building on their own, with the exception of really cold days, this has to supplement. But the system's designed so that they're all running constantly. So it's not good to have one system shut down for about 50 times.